Can we get a copy of that? They're finding it anywhere. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to call the Planning Commission meeting to order for March 26th, 2025. Welcome to our meeting. Thanks so much for joining us. And could we have a roll call from the staff, please?
Commissioner Williams,
Present.
Commissioner Woodward,
Present.
Commissioner Sai,
Here.
Chair DeFever,
Here.
and Vice Chair Amir is absent.
Okay, before we turn to the noticed agenda items for the evening, we have the opportunity for general public comment on subjects that do not appear on tonight's agenda. So if you'd like to make a public comment about something not on the agenda tonight, please approach the podium. And then let me ask Chris if we have anyone on Zoom that has raised their hand.
Chair DeFever, we have no public comments on the Zoom audience.
Okay. Seeing none, let's move forward to staff briefing. Do we have a staff briefing tonight?
I do not.
Okay, does anyone have any general questions of staff? I actually have one myself. I noticed in the packet an issue that has come up in the past where, and we've discussed this, whether we're reviewing the CUPs when we intend to review the conditional use permits. And I just wanted to get an update because I know our planning development, community development director, Dina, has informed us on this in the past, and I actually don't remember where we left the discussion off. I know COVID threw us off in our scheduling, but where are we with keeping up on reviewing conditional use permits on schedule?
So we actually don't have a lot of them, but the ones that we have, what we've been doing is we have brought them to you when there are issues. We haven't been doing it as an update. So that has how we have been doing it. And yes, we are behind due to the 3 years we didn't have any public hearings whatsoever. And most of the businesses that would have been that would have had conditional use permits that might have needed an update were not operating. So there was no need. And in general, what we felt is that the condition, we've looked at the condition as when there is an issue, we bring it back.
Okay, thank you for that update. Do any commissioners have any questions or comments about that? Seeing no one, thank you, Dina, appreciate it. Okay, so let's move forward to the minutes. We are set to review the minutes from February 26th. Do any commissioners have any corrections or comments about these minutes?
I just have a question on the public hearing, item 1. My memory, I could be wrong, is that we approved the resolution with revisions, proposed revisions. And I don't know if that's captured in the minutes.
We did. The revision had to do with the historic districts.
Exactly.
And so, yes,
Some
we
other,
did.
some other minor
Some
revisions.
the to and the toe. There were some
Exactly.
spelling issues.
Good memory.
We did correct those. That is going to council
Okay,
April 2nd. So we can amend that accordingly.
great.
Was this the issue that we also decided to put back the noticing provision, or is this a different?
That was a different one that had to do with ADUs.
Okay, thank
So
you.
this had to do with SB 9. So you put back historic district callouts and limitations with respect to historic districts.
Okay. Thank
Well,
you for that refreshing of the memory. Yes, Commissioner
If
Wilson.
there are no other comments, I would move to approve the minutes as amended.
Okay, do we have a second for that?
I'll second.
We have a second, and can we do a roll call vote, Chris?
Commissioner Sai?
Aye.
Commissioner Woodward?
Aye.
Commissioner Williams?
Aye.
Chair DeFever.
Aye. So the minutes have passed unanimously. And now we move to our action items, which we have one on the agenda tonight. Actually, sorry, we have none on the agenda tonight for action items, but we have our public hearing. So we can move forward to the public hearing, which is PH 841 Tiburon Boulevard. Consideration of a conditional use permit requesting an amendment to the original permit to allow amplified music to be played during events at the Landmarks Art and Garden Center. The project site is zoned as R1, which is single-family residential, and it's categorically exempt to CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. So let's start then with a staff report, if we have one.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I know it's a pretty full house, so I will make my comments brief to allow everybody ample time to speak. As you were saying, the purpose of tonight's hearing is to consider an amendment that was requested for the conditional use permit that was originally issued in 1997 for the Landmarks Art and Garden Center, which is located at 841 Tiburon Boulevard. It is a bit of a unique situation. It's an event center that is located in a single-family zone. So per our code, that use is permitted, but it does require a conditional use permit to account for things such as noise, traffic, et cetera. During the original review, there was a condition that was added that prohibited amplified music during outdoor events. So the use that was approved itself is for a year-round event set, or pardon me, the original CUP is for year-round special events on the property, specifically weddings, receptions, and similar types of events. And although it was conditioned, the town was made aware recently that there have been events occurring for the last, I would say, it sounds like 20 plus years, essentially since the original use permit was issued, where events have had DJs, which are not permitted. So when we were made aware of that, we reached out to Landmarks, and they have been working with us to consider their options. And that ultimately leads us tonight, where they have filed an application requesting that we amend that CUP. And the only amendment would be for the condition that currently prohibits music to allow amplified music during those outdoor events. So they are here tonight, and they've prepared a presentation, but we're also happy to answer any questions regarding the original use, what they're proposing, and any additional questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. Do any Thank you. Do any commissioners have questions for the staff before we move toward the applicant presentation?
I have a question. This actually doesn't relate to noise, but it does relate to the conditions of approval that are proposed. And many of the conditions seem to relate to the original building of the construction of the buildings. And I'm just wondering if those still need to be in Exhibit B as conditions of approval, current conditions of approval. There are a number of them. I mean, there are almost 10 or 8 or 10. Yeah.
You want me to? Yes.
They just seem
Uh,
historic.
And you're correct. So the original conditional use permit, there were modifications that were proposed to the actual building and site. So a lot of the conditions reflect changes that would have to occur to the property, mitigation measures that were in response to the initial study that was prepared. So it was just to keep it consistent with the original approval and only amend that. So
And it's my understanding removing conditions sort of is a different process than really
agree.
before us today. So we're just kind of taking the old approval and looking at this one condition.
Okay.
As to the rest, it's a kind of a different legal.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's not before us
Yes,
tonight. Okay, great.
exactly.
Thank you.
Excellent question, Commissioner Williams. I
you.
was going to ask that later if someone didn't. All right, well, thank you. Any other questions, commissioners? No? All right, well, you're ready for the applicant presentation. You have up to 20 minutes. You don't have to use all of the 20 minutes, but you're welcome to. And please introduce yourself before the presentation starts.
Yeah, give us a moment to get it all set up.
Chris, can you remind me where I'm pointing this thing to be effective? Oh, okay.
Do you know where the pointer is as well?
I'm
If
not
you need
doing-
the
I'm
laser
not doing
pointer?
any of this.
Okay.
Ready?
Yes.
Okay, that does work. Good evening. My name is Mark Freiberg, and I'm the Vice President of the Belvedere Tiburon Landmarks Society. And I'm here tonight to talk about our wonderful Art and Garden Center and our request for an amended conditional use permit. So let's start out by making sure everybody knows who the Landmark Society is. We are a 501c3 not-for-profit California Public Benefit Corporation. So we're a nonprofit, but unlike many nonprofits that might be set up for the benefit of their members, we are set up for the benefit of the public. And our mission statement is written there: to acquire, preserve, and maintain artifacts, landmarks, and open space of local historical significance and make them available to the public. We are basically a group of volunteers. There are about 50 of us, a little more than that. We have just 3 staff members, and they're all part-time. We provide historical exhibits, like museums, records, lectures, newsletters. We also provide music concerts, special event venues, plein air classes, art exhibits, and summer camps. Can everybody hear me okay? I want to do a quick check on that. Okay.
Yes.
We operate and maintain 4 local historic properties, which I'll quickly show you. They're each between 135 and 160 years old. Plus, we have history archives and an administrative office. And as you can guess from properties that are of that age, it requires a diverse and a sustainable revenue stream to be able to keep them all operating. So real quickly, other than the Art and Garden Center, which will be coming up, we operate Old St. Hilary's. We own and operate Old St. Hilary's. Where we do have some weddings of medium size, and we have a number of concerts throughout the year, which bring in some relatively small amount of revenue when you factor in the costs of them also. And in fact, talking about costs for each of these facilities on this slide, we have taken the annual maintenance cost for the last 2 years and averaged them out. So when I say ongoing costs for Old St. Hilary's for the last 2 years, that has averaged $43,000 each year. All right. And then upcoming, in each case, we have some special projects that require funding too. So in that case, we're going to be replacing the heating system for an additional $30,000. The China Cabin, the former salon from a steamship, is another venue where weddings are held. It has very limited outdoor space. There's a couple patios on either end of the building. So only small weddings can be held here, 55 people or fewer. The ongoing costs over the last 2 years have averaged $56,000 a year. And we're currently in contract to do roof sealing at $7,000 additional dollars. The Railroad and Ferry Museum is very popular on Shoreline Park. As I noted there, last year it drew over 13,000 visitors. It's actually owned by the town of Tiburon. We have a lease to care and preserve for the building and to run the museum inside. So our ongoing costs over the last 2 years have averaged $9,000. And if you see the building today, it's got scaffolding and workers around it who are painting the exterior for an additional $40,000 of our dollars. The history archives and offices are located at the shopping mall, the Boardwalk Shopping Center downtown. This is where our staff costs are reflected. So you'll note that the ongoing cost of almost $280,000 per year reflect that. They also, that number also reflects the insurance cost for all of our properties. All right, so that's why that number is so much larger. And then we have to upgrade our computer network in our office for an additional $6,000. So here's a picture of the Art and Garden Center that we're focused on tonight. This is the only property we operate which has any real potential for outdoor events. The cost to operate this facility is about $70,000 per year. And upcoming, we have to replace the irrigation system for what will be another $30,000 or thereabouts. This does have the operational limitations that was mentioned in the conditional use permit established in 1997, so I won't introduce what that's all about. Everybody here knows that that sets limits to ensure that the operations are consistent with the neighborhood's character and so on. Just real briefly on the history, this is, as far as we know, the oldest existing structure on the Tiburon Peninsula. It was built before the railroad, when there were dairies and some brick kilns, and it was originally a bunkhouse for the workers at the brick kilns. In the World War II era, the Newmans, a couple, bought it and worked with a New York landscape architect to design the wonderful gardens that were there. And when Helen Newman, the last of that couple, passed away, the property was bequeathed to the Landmark Society in 1995. In 1997, the concept for an art and garden center was approved by the town council. And then the design and planned operation was in essence approved by the planning commission. In 1998, our Landmark Society invested $350,000 of our money to renew and upgrade the facility, such as putting in modern fire sprinkler systems. If you convert that to today's dollars, that's almost $700,000. All right, so there was a conditional use permit process in 1997, considered things like parking, traffic circulation, light and glare, noise, hours of operation, et cetera. The process did include, we looked through the record carefully, of course, the process did include discussion with neighbors, including a discussion party at the China Cabin. An example was a request for a tall fence or effective landscaping to screen out light from a neighbor. Made sense, and that was done. Also, story poles were actually put up because at that point, it was planned that there would be a new structure built on the property to serve as an art studio. Later on, the Landmark Society decided not to go forward with that. Another thing that had been talked about that we never went forward with was the possibility of holding concerts at the outdoor venue. So where music would be the primary draw, not a background or a supplemental feature of an event. That never happened. No plans for it now. At the time, the planning commissioner noted that he was optimistic about the project since there have been no objections from the neighbors. The 1997 permit stated then that the project was consistent with the Tiburon General Plan, as it was written then, and the Tiburon zoning ordinance. And I want to point that out because some of the letters we've seen have repeatedly referred to our operations being inconsistent with the R1 zoning, and I take issue with it, but I'd be happy to learn from the commission, other perspectives. In the record, it said the proposed use would enhance the historical character of the buildings, help preserve the history of the area. So the application was approved. We established the Art and Garden Center with the conditions that the hours of operation would be limited to Sunday through Thursday could go as late as 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday could go as late as 11 p.m. We've never gone that late. Special events require off-site parking, a shuttle service, and signage. That's something we've had in place and continue to operate. The PA systems for speech were to be only a single microphone with minimal amplification. And then that was fine, but there was a note in there that surprised us when we in the modern era looked at it that said no amplified music at any outdoor events, because as far as we can recall, there has always been some form of moderately amplified music at just about every event going back decades. So I'll get into that in more detail. What I'll do is quickly walk you through the different activities at the Art and Garden Center, and we pick a particular year, an example year. Let's take last year because we've got data for it. 2024, what did that look like? Over that year, we had 17 daytime garden weddings. So a garden wedding is a little different than some other weddings, but we all know kind of what that looks and feels like. In addition to those 17 events, there were 2 other events held outdoors, a B'nai Mitzvah and a local homeowners association had their annual meeting, again with some background music, which was moderately amplified. When we say music these days, we're almost always meaning either a recording or perhaps a disc jockey, and it always involves just an electric speaker. So technically that's, of course, amplification. The average wedding size was 91 for these events. The range was a low end of 50 and a high end of 150, which is the most that we can have at the property. The revenue tends to be around $5,000 per event, but it depends on the size of the event. And all but one of these events last year did include some amplified music, and that was the only event we can think of that hasn't. Honestly, everybody assumes and expects there will be some degree of music at their events. As you might guess, with the Art and Garden Center, gardening is another use of the property. We actually have a contracted gardener who comes every Friday for 3 hours throughout the year. A minority of those hours, maybe an hour, hour and a half, is, lawn mowing and leaf blowing, so there's noise there, as there would be if these were just regular homes on this property rather than our Art and Garden Center, of course. And I'll say that since September of last year, we have now coordinated the drop-offs that occur before a wedding, when all the tables are dropped off and so on, and truck backs up, and things, there's some noise there. So we've coordinated it now to fall when the gardening noise is happening, to protect some of the weekend noise for our neighbors. The Ranch, another nonprofit in Tiburon, makes good use of our facility here. Over the summer, they hold an Art and Garden Day camp for their little campers. It had originally been 8 weeks. When we heard concerns from a neighbor that the kids were making noise, we pared it down to 4 weeks. And then later we've heard that, well, that actually wasn't so bad. So this year we're hoping to raise it to 5 weeks, and we'll see how that goes. We are honestly always trying to adjust where we can. We get no benefit out of having a bad relationship with neighbors. All right, the weekdays between 9 a.m. and 2:30 p.m., this is typical what I'll call kid noise, but it's generally low level. We are open from the public on Sundays, May through October. That's our open season. And then November through April, we have a closed season where it's essentially the facility is closed and unoccupied, except for certain things, the garden maintenance and some events that do get scheduled during that generally closed period. All right, again, open to the public is low noise. Plein air painting, you might guess, is very low noise. That happens year round, once a month for 3 hours. Then we have partial days for a spring social, Mother's Day, holiday arts and crafts, and we're looking into hosting a knitting group. We anticipate that will, of course, be low noise. All right. So most of the time, the grounds are closed and the facility is empty and silent. Again, we have this long season where we're closed, essentially. Weddings can be scheduled. We had a February scheduled wedding one time, but for the most part, it's closed. And when we looked at 2024 and added up all the hours, 93% of the time, the facility is closed and empty and silent. So we put that on a pie chart here. And there it is visually. So weddings, which are what we're talking about here, honestly, the outdoor events in general, but the vast majority of those are weddings. So excuse me if I just generalize to say weddings, are the green slice. Now, some people might say, Mark, wait a second, you're counting, in the middle of the night, everybody's asleep. Of course you're closed then. But I would like to push back a little bit on that because we're talking about noise, neighborhood noise, and no neighborhood noise is more annoying than that which happens late at night, in the middle of the night, and so on, which is why the town's official measure of noise, the day-night average sound level, has any readings taken between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. They have to have 10 decibels added to them because it's particularly annoying. So I think it's important to look at the 24-hour clock and keep in mind that unlike if homes were there, there would be potential noise sources in the middle of the night. In our facility, there's no potential for it. If we take away those nighttime noises, let's adjust the pie chart. Okay, we're only looking at 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. now. We're closed 87% of the year. All right, that doesn't mean there can't be times when there are problems. We recognize that, but this is context. We have a long history of a few complaints, and this, I think, explains why. I mean, everybody's wondering, well, how can you have a permit for this many years and not realize that it had that line in it? honestly, for many, many years, we never had any complaints whatsoever. The first complaint was a surprise to us. Looking through the modern records, we saw that in 2014, the town had actually received a complaint about wedding noise. And as far as we know, it was never passed along to us. There's no record of that for us. In 2016, we did have a neighbor contact us directly and talked about the fact that from his perspective, the wedding noises were going too late into the evening. So we adjusted things. We pulled our music stop time back from 9 p.m. to 8:30. We instantly lost 5 wedding contracts. So this is a very sensitive criterion for people. Since 2022, when one neighbor moved back into the area after having been away for a while, we've had a series of communications with that neighbor over event noise. And we've continued to try to make further operational adjustments where we can, practically speaking, while continuing to meet our mission. In one case, we provided a gift certificate to that neighbor, to the Petite Left Bank, not because the music was particularly loud, but because it was particularly bad. It was discordant, let's say, for the record. Okay. So actions we've already taken to benefit our neighbors. I mentioned the early start time. We notify our neighbors, the 2 closest ones on Tiburon Boulevard, get the schedule at the start of the season so they know all the events that will be coming. Other neighbors that are immediately adjacent to us and those neighbors are notified before each event. We are diligently enforcing the end times. Guests have to be off property by 9 p.m. Vendors have to be gone by 10. We are, I mentioned the delivery and also pickups are scheduled now for Friday and Monday to protect our neighbors' weekend time as much as possible. We've reduced the summer camp, as I mentioned, time. We are performing hedge and ivy work, not just on our own property, but on our neighbor's property where we have a hedge to protect that neighbor from light and whatnot. We actually allowed that neighbor also to use our parking lot for a private event that they were having. And most recently then, of course, we hired for the tune of $5,000, a wonderful acoustic consultant to perform noise monitoring on a simulated wedding event and recommend some additional changes that we could do. We'll talk about that. But real quickly, this is what a typical wedding day looks like from a schedule perspective at the facility. And you can see that what shows up is background music at several times, dancing music, and then I didn't highlight it, I should have, between 5 and 6 p.m. toasts. I also, full disclosure, let's acknowledge that the day before, there's also a walkthrough of the facility. That's low noise. Here's a picture of the yellow dots are the positions of the sound level meters that were used on each of our property lines, not on the front road, of course. And it's hard to see, but I'm going to try and point with my laser here. One speaker here and one speaker here. This is the area where background music happens and is measured, and also the speeches, the toasts, okay? And then dancing music, and they actually used primarily disco dancing music for this test because that has the broadest range of frequencies. But some hip hop and some others has one speaker up here and the dancing floor monitor here close to the perimeter here. I note they actually didn't put on the fence line. It was a little hard to get through the landscaping. So in these cases, it's actually a little closer to the noise source. Let's, oh, I'm sorry, I was pressing the wrong button. Okay, so quick picture of what the sound level meters look like towards the edge of the property. This is the dance floor with the one speaker. The DJ we hired for this has done more than 50 weddings at our property, so he knows what it takes. All right, and that's his DJ station on the right. So looking at the dancing sound levels, it's quite possible, this test showed that it's quite possible on the dance floor to have very, danceable music, and you can hear it. And the DJ can hear it clearly, and yet at the fence line, we had 61, 1 decibel over the 60 decibels A-weighted that the town has as its criterion in the general plan 2040. But obviously we can tweak this. We can get this easily below 60. So this was a positive test as far as we were concerned. This can be done. And moving on, here's a picture of the setup. The one speaker is off the left side of the picture here, but this is for the background music and the toasts. And here we see that it's possible to hear the speech on the lawn, and yet we can protect the fence line property at all three sides, all right? And amplified speech, so the microphone setup had 10 levels possible. He started on level 4, and frankly, we could hear that this is too loud. Turn it down to level 3. Let's see what that's like. And here, this proved to work also, quite discernible where it needs to be, and yet below 60 at the property line. To me, this is really important. This proves that this can be done. What it takes is monitoring, and we plan to monitor every event going forward. So the current permit allows anything that isn't amplified. So we could bring in mariachi bands, taiko drummers, bagpipes, you name it. But we can't have anything electronic because that would be amplification. It just doesn't make sense. So here, we need to know that we've got weddings currently in contract. These contracts have been in place in many cases for a year already. These couples are on pins and needles waiting to hear whether they can go forward. We've had 2 cancel, one just yesterday. I'm surprised we haven't had more cancellations so far. We are really hoping for a clear determination tonight on this question before you on our proposal. The town manager did approve our going forward with amplified music in April and May. And there's the full plate of what we're working with. So we agree with Planning Division's recommendation that amplified music should be okay so long as it does not exceed 60 decibels at the property line. We plan to measure every event at the property lines using the sound level meter that's been recommended by our consultant. There's a picture of it there. We'll be providing advance notifications to any neighbor who wants to know. And we have new contract language that tells people we will be monitoring your event. And if you don't keep it down to acceptable levels, we can pull the plug on it and take your security deposit.
Your time is up, so please.
And
wrap
I'm
up
done.
Your last,
We
okay,
hope to notify the couples we can proceed. Thank you.
okay. Thank you very much. Please stay there for a second.
Okay.
Commissioners may have questions for
Sure.
you. Commissioner Erica Williams is nodding.
No,
So
I don't want to, if others have questions, feel free
would
to
anyone
jump
like to
in.
open with
I have
questions?
several questions.
All right, well, go ahead. No one else is leaping at the opportunity.
Okay. So I'll just take them one at a time. There's no
Sure.
particular order, just as I was noting things down. On your other venues, China Cabin, Old St. Hilary's, just out of curiosity, do you allow music or amplified music there? I know those are much smaller spaces and there's not a lot of room for dancing.
Yeah, so at Old St. Hilary's, we have concerts. So yes, amplified
And it's
music is
amplified,
used
it's
there.
not just
Yeah,
amplified.
inside. Now that's an
Right,
inside
not
venue,
inside.
and there's no opportunity for a reception where you would dance or anything like that.
Understood. Yeah.
At China Cabin, yes. In fact, I got married there. We had amplified music, little speaker. All it takes is a boom box. It's a very small place, and whether it's indoors or outside on those little patios, that works. There's no,
There are windows and doors that open or doors that open up to the
yeah,
outside.
and that's Belvedere, by the way.
And that conditional use permit for that allows amplification.
There is no conditional use permit for that. We checked the record and there is no, but that's Belvedere.
Right. I just curious.
Wonderful people, but that's
Yeah,
Belvedere.
no, I understand. I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely understand the point that you're making about the
Sure.
distinction between Belvedere and Tiburon. You noted that as far back as you can tell from the records, amplification has been allowed, music's been allowed. Have weddings, did you start right off the bat with weddings?
None of us were there right at the start. Unfortunately, there's turnover in volunteers and in staff, but as far as we could check, there's no record of that line having been recognized from the get-go. And I honestly don't think it was intentional. It was mentioned that somehow that was inserted. It wasn't even clear to us looking at the record why it was inserted, but there it is.
Right. I was just curious if historically you sort of had weddings, those were events that were happening from the beginning of your.
As far as we know, it's always been that way. And it's an expectation of anybody who books well, of course we can have some music
It's
there.
clear that weddings, that's the primary type of event that you have now that generates revenue and that.
Yes. And this
seems
one
to be
facility
from the
is the primary revenue generator for the whole network
Understood. Yeah.
network
Yeah.
of structures that we operate.
You said there's one electric speaker. So when you do have,
Disco dance area,
when-
excuse me, the dance area, whatever type.
I'm sorry, one speaker for music. That's when, so you're amplifying it through just a single
Yes,
speaker.
one 8-inch speaker, and yes, the
Yeah.
contract language will be specifying.
Right. And the sound study, I believe, called for setting that up perpendicular to Tiburon Boulevard. Is that typically how it had been set up before, or would that be a new circumstance, as a mitigating circumstance?
My colleagues will have to correct me if I'm wrong, but again, the DJ that we hired had done 50 weddings here, and I think, was there tweak?
I think we need to
We'll
have
need you at the
you
mic.
come to the mic and introduce yourself and state your name. Yeah, just for the record.
My name is Patty Flax, and I'm the executive director of the Landmark Society. And when I started with them, I actually did the events, so I can speak to this. So my experience in the past has been at the events. Sorry if my breath is not. At the events, on the dance area, there would be two speakers facing out to the water. So when we met with the DJ this last time, the one who's had a lot of experience there, he suggested in order to have the sound really effective in the middle of the dance floor, it's actually better to have one speaker going straight out to the dance floor. And so that's why we set it up that way.
Okay,
Okay. But
Great.
we've always had the recommendation that speakers face out to the water.
right. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome.
You indicated that you would be monitoring events going forward. Is that just a person, an individual monitoring, and is that?
People, yeah, with
Yeah.
a sound level meter,
Yeah, and
trained
would
to
you
use it.
Have any objection to that
Calibrated.
being written into as a condition of approval?
No.
I don't think it's. in there
Plan to
now.
do it, yeah, that would be fine.
Let's see. Oh, you.
And that, just to be clear,
Yeah.
that would be at the perimeter, we wouldn't necessarily do
Absolutely.
a full
Wouldn't embed
acoustic study.
yourself.
We don't want to be
Yeah.
intrusive on
Totally,
the
totally,
event.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you're not going to fully
Right.
embed yourself. You're going to be discreet about that.
Discreet, yes, camouflaged.
So I know that you notified the immediate neighbors.
On Tiburon
of the full
Boulevard,
schedule,
yes.
and then two other neighbors you indicated.
The neighbors uphill from
Above
us, we
you.
could say, yeah.
Is there any, there were a few other neighbors who wrote in who said that they're not notified. It's not a large
Mhm.
number. Is there any objection to further, just a notification to include a few more?
Super easy, email, add their addresses, it's done.
I think that concludes my series of questions. Thank you.
Sure, great.
All right, Commissioner Woodward, any questions?
It seemed from your presentation that a number of the issues have arisen since 2022. So just in the past few years, presumably there's history. You look like you kept a very good record of things prior to that. So what changed in 2022? Has there been different types of music being used? Anything in the venue? Has it literally just been?
Right. This is a question, I'm actually fairly new to the board of directors. And this is a question I asked, what was our pattern like pre-COVID, for example? And in fact, it turns out that we have not yet returned to the pre-COVID level. There was a year, and I forget the exact number, but we had a higher usage of the facility pre-COVID. We're getting back to that level. I can't say what it was in the old days. Certainly there was a ramp up, the first years it would have almost nothing, right? And then it becomes more and more popular. There are advertisements online on, bridal sites that I don't spend a lot of time on, but there's one called The Knot, and a couple others that are well known. So it's become a popular site, but we are not yet, we've had higher levels again, pre-COVID. So what changed? Honestly, we had a neighbor who had been renting out her, or it's a couple. They had been renting out the home, is my understanding. And while we'd never gotten any complaints from any of the renters when they themselves moved back, and they had been a homeowner early on, I believe they were homeowners when this was first set up, actually. But they came back, just a number of concerns. And so just a string of communications, and some we've been able to honor and some we feel we can't.
Okay. And do you know if that homeowner moved back in 2022 or if there was potentially the COVID time where everything was silent, no events were going on, and then all of a sudden it came back like that kind of spike or that trough to the peak now is causing some of the issues? Just curious. As I
I,
saw there were a lot of comments in the letters about
Yeah.
how the frequency of events.
yeah. I don't have any data on that. Patty, do you?
We could add 2022 was the year that.
The people attending on Zoom can't hear if anyone talks out of the audience, so.
And we need names stated for the
So,
record.
Yeah.
confirmed 2022 as the neighbors ran through. So
I have a feeling that data will come up
Yeah.
later anyway, so let's skip over that.
thank you. That was
Sure.
extent of my
Sure.
questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Sai?
Thank you for the presentation. Can you back to the slide that reflected the number of complaints that have come in before?
And yeah, I had kind of a summary. I don't know that I did not have a hard number, but there we go. I call it a long history of few complaints because for the longest time, we never heard complaints. The first one, again, was registered with the town and we don't have any record of that having been passed along to us. So 2016, I think, was the first noise concern.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you have 4 contiguous neighbors to the property. Is that right?
Yes.
Are the complaints that either are reflected here in the slide or other ones that are not that you're thinking of? I'm just trying to understand where the complaints are coming from. Are the contiguous neighbors,
Oh, no, some are beyond.
some are beyond?
Yeah.
Do you know where-
Some are non-contiguous. I didn't take the time to look at the addresses and map them out, but I don't know if any of my colleagues did.
There was a letter with a street that, Gilmartin, which runs kind of parallel.
It's a near
to
cross
the-
street.
To the west.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe that means some of them are not
Mhm.
next to, because I think there was more than one person that signed that letter. And I think there's only one house on Gilmartin that borders the property. So by inference, I believe, that's at least one.
Yeah, there might be 2. I mean, again, I
Yeah.
can't, I'm looking at a map, I can't quite tell for sure. But I was just trying to get a sense beyond whether what's on this slide or post 2022, in 2023, 24 in particular. What have the nature of the complaints been? Where have they been coming from? And what's the nature of the complaints? Is it just
Maybe I could let Patty address that. Would you mind? Because you've been in those conversations, so.
So,
Let you sit there.
sure, thank you. I would say that the majority of the complaints have come from our one neighbor who is on the west side of the property.
West? Okay. Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. Any other questions, Commissioners? I have one about the structure of the Landmarks Society. I understand that it's a nonprofit that is organized for the public benefit, but I just kind of wanted to wrap my head around. I think I understand how this works, but I'm just going to ask you to explain it to me. So when someone books an event, since you're not a commercial operation, how do you determine how much they're paying and how does that transaction work?
Patty, you're closer again.
So just like any other venue might do, we set a site fee. And then a person puts down a deposit and then pays a second deposit closer to the date. And does that answer your question?
So it's a flat fee. It doesn't
It
matter.
actually, no, if you have 0 to 50 people, I believe the fee is, Paige, you're going to have to help me on this.
55 people is 4,000.
You'll
1
have
to
to repeat.
55 people is 4,000.
Okay.
50 to 100 is going to be 4,500, and over 100 is going to be 5,000.
She's nodding her head up and down.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for repeating that into the microphone so that everyone can
course.
hear it and putting it in the record.
We're giving back.
That we have to. and pay
Yes.
for it.
So when weddings are canceled, we return the deposit, of course, especially in this case when we're, not able to provide what we promised to provide. Also, with some of the weddings that are canceling, we've been asked to return deposits for vendors that had been left with vendors for the event. So beyond the cost of just the deposit that we had, now we're covering deposits that our clients have made with their vendors.
So are these deposits considered donations to the Landmarks Foundation or?
They are, half of it is considered a donation. So they are getting something for their site fee, if you will, but they are also getting a 50% donation on the cost of the site.
Okay, thank you. I remembered, I knew about this like 20 years ago, I
Yeah.
think, but was trying to recall how the structure worked, and I was curious. It is part of our deliberation, like how the entity is operating. We're not
Yes.
trying to audit you
Of
or
course
anything
not.
like this.
No, I understand. You have a very good memory.
But we do consider, obviously from zoning, et cetera, what kind of operation is in front of us as the applicant. It really does matter. So thank you
Of
for
course.
answering. Anyone else? Any
My
other
pleasure.
commissioner questions?
I do actually have a couple of follow-up questions. Just one on this, and it may be the way I printed out my packet. So I have it attached to the sound study, but there's the 2025 music sound agreement, which incorporates, I think, the mitigating proposals.
That's correct.
Have you used this have you used this agreement, or would for any weddings that have transpired to date, or this would be a prospective kind of looking forward?
The one that you're seeing there is
Yeah.
new, but Paige, maybe you can speak to the use of this type of agreement in the past.
No, it's not so much the use of the agreement, it's really just to the sound, to the sort of conditions of use. Those have not been, you have not, I'm trying to determine what of the kind of ideas that we've had, because I know you've worked with neighbors to integrate some mitigating measures into
Yes.
the use. And what I'm trying to determine is how much of these have been tested that are before us.
Right.
And how much will be newly tested or potentially newly tested going forward, just to get a sense of what's
Sure.
working, what's not.
So it's my understanding, and Paige will confirm this, that in the past, there is a clause in our contract that says we are in a residential neighborhood. It's a sound-sensitive venue. If you do not comply with our on-site person's monitoring of your music, we can turn off your music. Or if there's a complaint, we will turn off your music. So
Right.
that's been existing for a long time. Whether we've had an agreement like this that's been signed by both the client and the DJ, I think that's a relatively new development, but it has happened before this particular one that's now been changed to meet the recommendations of the sound study.
Right, okay. And then a question came up, or a proposal came up from a neighbor relating to parking. I know it's not related to noise, but I think it is something that could potentially be for us to consider as a part of the CUP. I got my sense from reading the current CUP is that off-site parking you have a shuttle to provide off-site parking, and on-site parking for guests really isn't allowed. And so I asked that because one of the letters that came in from someone who had some more limited sort of objections and then some suggestions for how to mitigate, asked that parking on the street be kept away from driveways for the neighboring properties by coning off at least 50 feet on each side. And I asked, and in looking at the CUP, I was a little bit confused because I don't believe on-site parking is allowed for guests. So is that just people violating kind of the rules as you?
So we have 12 parking spots on the property, and those do get used at events, not necessarily for guests, but it might be vendors, it might be the photographer, it will be our on-site docent, it might be the grandparents who.
This is on street. I think they're talking about people parking on
Okay,
Tiburon
on street.
Boulevard. Yeah.
So yes, we do put cones out, and we do make an effort to keep people
Right,
from parking.
right. So
Tiburon
that, to
Boulevard.
the extent people are doing that, that's sort of in violation of your own rules.
That's
And
correct.
That would just be a monitoring issue, not a
That's a monitoring issue, yeah.
thing. Sorry, I didn't articulate that very well, but
That's all right.
I think those are I just had one follow-up question for staff, which was just if amplified, if we have any other examples in town where amplified music is allowed in neighborhoods, there might not be many like this, but I just
No, I
curious
think-
if we have any
I
other
think the only
examples.
time you've dealt with this was with a restaurant in downtown. where you dealt with amplified music, but we don't have anything like this anywhere else, no, that I'm aware of, no.
Great, okay. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other commissioners with questions, thank you very much, applicant. Now I'm going to open the public hearing. So anyone who would like to speak in the public about this topic, you will have 2 minutes, and there is a clock over here on the television screen. Should we do 3 minutes?
Up to you.
I was looking at the clock and it's almost 7:30 thinking, I'm not so sure. We can do 3 minutes. I'm okay with it. Commissioners have any complaints? No? All right, let's do I love hearing more. So let's do 3 minutes. Generally, we ask you to just come up to the podium when the podium is empty. You can also line up if you like in the center walkway here. But we make sure everyone has a chance to talk, so you don't have to worry that we'll run out of time and not hear you. So, are we ready online? Is it all? Okay. All right. If the first person would like to come up and speak, and please state your name, and it's helpful if we understand where you live, your address, or at least your neighborhood. More specificity is probably more useful. Thank you.
So, good evening. My name is Kim Weichel. My husband and I live next door to the Landmark Art and Garden Center on Tiburon Boulevard and have lived there since 1985. Helen Newman bequeathed the property to the Landmark Society for use as an art center and to preserve the gardens. The original board met with us and with neighbors and promised there would be no amplification. So that was at the beginning, no amplification per their conditional use permit, very infrequent events and only quiet activities, which we accepted. No specific guidelines were ever developed, and what is happening today is a far cry from their charter or what the board stated. We understand that community artists have had difficulty booking art events since dates need to be saved for weddings. This was not the intention of Helen Newman. Unfortunately, they have violated their permit for decades. The zoning remains an R1 or residential property. Weddings have become increasingly frequent, larger, louder, and longer than is fair in a private residential neighborhood. We are strongly opposed to amplification as sound resounds around our entire property and neighborhood and takes away our rights as homeowners to privacy and quiet enjoyment per the California Covenant on Quiet Enjoyment. Amplification is very disruptive and irritating to neighbors. All weddings are held outdoors where sound carries widely, mere feet from our property, exacerbated by amplification. We hear every toast, announcement, and speech, which is very disruptive. We have often asked to have the volume turned down with little effect. We have been unable to read a book in our own patio, nor able to entertain guests while amplification is used. The neighbors request Tiburon to devise appropriate guidelines for future weddings and public events at the Landmark Center to respect neighbors' rights, including 1, frequency of weddings. There were 20 weddings last summer, and the same number is planned for this summer. They have 10 weddings in a row from August 15th through October 18th, which is really unfair for a private neighborhood. Neighbors need space between weddings. 2, crowd size. Many weddings are large, often up to 150 attendees. This is very disruptive, especially when people drink alcohol. We are concerned this exceeds the fire limit with only 1 egress onto Tiburon Boulevard. Neighbors feel a maximum of 75 guests is more appropriate. 3, duration. Weddings often last 7 hours, which is excessive. With setup and cleanup time, it is around 12 hours of disruption for every wedding, which is really unfair to neighbors. While we are members and supporters of the Landmark Society, we also must stand up for our rights as homeowners to privacy and quiet enjoyment. So in summary, we oppose the Landmark's application for amplification and request that Tiburon develop specific guidelines that are much more in line with a private neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent timing.
Good evening. I'm Amanda Stevens, and I've lived in Tiburon for over 20 years and at 835 Stony Hill for 8 years. In that time, I've experienced wonderful neighbors and the nearby open space, but also the growing number of events and noise coming from the Art and Garden Center. I'm here tonight to represent a number of families on Gilmartin and Stony Hill Drives. Some are here tonight, but I'm speaking. We are some of those neighbors that have not ever been contacted. And this is as follow-up to the letter that we wrote to the Planning Commission that questioned and opposed the growing noise that disrupts even further than the contiguous neighbors because of a lot of open space nearby, and the noise does indeed travel. We have not complained up until yet, mainly because we didn't know that we really had a right to. We were very shocked to learn that the outdoor amplification used at these events has been in violation of the 1997 CUP. My children are third generation Tiburon. Other neighbors also grew up in Tiburon. The town's history is personal and special to us, and we do recognize the Landmark Society's role in that. But it is a nonprofit organization, and the Art and Garden Center, being located in a residential area, both appear to be behaving as commercial entities in respect to the events at that property. My understanding of other events in other residential areas, such as the Lagunitas Club in Ross, tells a completely different story. In 2018, the Ross Town Council unanimously voted to reduce the number of amplified music events at that club to only 3, and 9 indoor. The town of Tiburon does have existing noise ordinances to keep even construction within acceptable levels. And I just can't imagine that these wedding events with outdoor amplified DJs who do rile up crowds and you hear every single word. I can't imagine that that has been in compliance with the noise ordinances. I know the Landmark Society did conduct that study earlier this year. I was unfortunately not at home that day to hear it myself. And I do believe they equated Tiburon Boulevard traffic noise with amplified music and DJ noise, but really, I mean, the ear hears traffic noise as background noise, and that is completely expected in a town. Weddings are not expected, at least this number and size of them. So, and actually, I do know that a few neighbors, 2 of the ones that have been contacted, have also actually received emails asking them not to play outdoor music or even applicable in their own yards during those weddings, so that to not disrupt the guests. So the center's proposed 10 consecutive outdoor amplified events just really feels very out of sync with what would be nice in a residential area. And I'm not an attorney by any means, but I do believe that some common sense and a sense of fairness is needed here for a serious review and study. And, you know, I appreciate a nonprofit's fundraising needs. I'm a board chair for a national nonprofit myself, but I don't think that their needs and rights should have sway over any more sway than tax-paying homeowners. So we just asked the commission to conduct this review and as to what's appropriate in a residential neighborhood and in compliance with the noise ordinances already on record. Thank you.
If I could ask you, the addresses that you represent, are they
Yes.
right next to the property or?
So no, they are not contiguous. So there are 2 on Gilmartin, 10 and 16 Gilmartin. And then also, and I guess that 16 Gilmartin does border the Gilmartin and Stony Hill. And then also I'm at 835 Stony Hill and it's 820 Stony Hill. So they are so there are one of them has been received emails, but then there's another one further down and then on. Nobody can see my drawing, but so there none of us are contiguous. None of us are contiguous.
Stony Hill is perpendicular to the property. And
Correct.
the houses you're talking about are both north and uphill.
Correct. And then also on as you drive up Gilmartin, because there is often parking disruptions up onto Gilmartin, and you know that could be
And on Gilmartin,
violation.
I think two properties
Mhm.
seem to be contiguous to the property, this property.
Mhm.
I had a question.
Yes.
You've said in your letter to us and here tonight that you were hoping that we develop specific guidelines around these events. Do you have, we have a number of really specific proposals in front of us tonight, including from Kim Weichel, who just spoke, and others. Do you have any, I'm trying to get a sense of
Yes.
what are particular measures you have in mind after looking at some of
I
these
mean,
things that are before us.
Yes, it's the blanket permitting of frequency. You know, I don't know that as a homeowner, I would be able to apply for 10 weekend parties in a row and have that given. So it's the number. I would like to see a cap on the number. And then it really is the outdoor. It
The
sounds like this is,
amplification.
it's the outdoor amplification.
Yeah. You
is-
did talk about that in your letter.
Mhm.
So limiting the number per year is
Mhm.
sort of the
Well, limiting the number of,
consecutive or?
well, it's, I suppose if you're not hearing, you know, the outdoor DJs or that, the amplification, it's the amplification that is, the frequency might be more acceptable if the noise level was lower.
Understood. I understood. Okay. Thank
Any
you.
other questions?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. I am Cam Shadan. I'm at 849 Tiburon Boulevard. So you've heard from the west and you've heard from the upper neighbors. I'm the east neighbor, where the dB level is right about 60 dBA. I am a professional engineer. I've been in Tiburon for nearly 50 years, served on the board, design review board. So I really appreciate the service you're doing. Hopefully we won't keep you here until 12 midnight. I would like to first recognize that as a resident, a master gardener and volunteer in Tiburon for many years and former design review board, I fully support the mission of Landmark. I would be one of the letters of support, but I would also request in that letter the commission to respect the right to quiet enjoyment of the immediate neighbors most impacted, such as myself, with this application. Almost all the letters of support are from board members or vendors or some residents far away, some of whom I know for many, many years. 4 letters asked the commission to either deny the application or ask for conditions to help mitigate the impacts. One of the letters was from a professional engineer who is also a noise consultant for over 20 years in San Francisco, which takes exception to the noise report that you have from somebody in Southern California. There are a few questions that will need to be considered. Is the noise study the basis of staff recommendation? If so, has the study been reviewed by the town's engineer? An email received today from another professional engineer in Bay Area Noise Consulting finds that the study is incomplete, and as to metric use for measurement, what he calls A weighting metric instead of more appropriate C weighting matrix sound. And the commission would not be prudent in taking any action on the application until a complete study is prepared and viewed by the town engineer, reviewed by the town engineer. The second thing is, did the staff take into consideration the adjacent property owners' questions? In consideration, it appears that the staff is deferring that consideration to you, and where in fact should be addressed in the staff report, especially in relation to the numbers and all that. Especially the stating that none of the support letters live next door, for example, in the staff report, is important to mention here. This also grounds for deferral until neighbors concerns are addressed. Last, once the 2 items above are addressed, we can clearly evaluate the merit of this application and conditions that should be placed if the commission is inclined to move forward. These include limiting the events to 2 Saturdays per month. Any more than that, it almost becomes a lifestyle change for the neighbors, because we have to worry about Landmark on only one day we have free to work in the yard or have party. Stopping the music at 8 p.m. where the noise level outside goes down quite a bit, letting the clients of Landmark know that in the contract that neighbors may have their own events and they can't stop their own events for Landmark's event. I mean, that's a lifestyle change. Other suggestions are in my email. And Erica mentioned here, for example, this coning off thing has happened once, but it's hard to manage, hard to monitor something like that. You know, you're not going to go at Saturday night at 8 p.m. try to find people to cone things off. So controlling nearly 100 people after a few alcoholic drinks and asking them to keep the music down and noise down at night has not always been possible.
Your time is up, so please.
Yeah, okay, I'm just
summarize.
one paragraph. During the afternoon hours when the ceremony is held, we have been asked to several occasions to be quiet, we propose that the neighbors be quiet Landmark's event, to propose that neighbors be quiet in Landmark's event in the afternoon while hearing the noise at night is unreasonable. I, along the other neighbors adjacent up and above, respectfully request that this application is deferred until such time as a complete noise study is performed and viewed by town's engineers and immediate neighbors' concerns are addressed fully in a staff report with the conditions as applicable. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm open to any questions.
Does anyone have any questions? Specifically, since he lives on Tiburon Boulevard? No? Okay,
I'm the east
thank you.
neighbor. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Carl Weichel of 835 Tiburon Boulevard. Since COVID, the number of Art and Garden Center weddings, their high sound levels, and the drinking, dancing, and loud partying have increased considerably. They are now booking in excess of 20 weddings a season. We feel our rights for privacy and quiet enjoyment are being disregarded. 6 surrounding neighbors oppose amplification. Besides their 1997 permit prohibiting amplified music, it also indicates that shuttle buses are to be used, yet guests often park on nearby Gilmartin Drive, causing parking congestion. The 18 letters submitted by Landmark supporters all miss the point. It appears none of these letter writers are affected by the sound, so how can they judge how much amplified music disturbs us? After all, we pay high residential real estate taxes, and peace and quiet on weekends should be our right, not a privilege. Our rationale, number 1, I'm not aware of any churches or clubs in Tiburon that allow music or amplification for wedding receptions, and I want to draw a discernment. There are 2 separate events. A wedding that usually lasts an hour, and then there's a wedding reception with entertainment, alcohol, and much different controls that can last from anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. They are not segregating those 2 parts. They can rent as little as a 1-hour wedding, but they choose not to because they have a tremendous demand because there's none around in the Tiburon Peninsula that I know of. Secondly, they presented a false choice argument that they would lose over $90,000 this summer if not given permission for amplification. Yet the problem can be easily solved by having bands play without amplification. They were never authorized to use this in the first place and should not be now. Number 3, Tiburon Sound Ordinance requires, quote, every entity to apply for a permit for each event with outdoor amplified music, end quote. Have they ever applied for a permit? Number 4, the sound ordinance lists 60 decibels as the maximum ambient level for sounds like car traffic. How do we neighbors know if this is tolerable for dance music in our uphill geographic sound bowl? Does this ordinance address amplification of ongoing speakers' salutations, energetic DJ hype, plus up to 4 hours of persistent intrusive dance music? The Tiburon Noise Ordinance lists as one of its goals, quote, to eliminate or reduce unnecessary, excessive, and offensive noises from all sources, end quote. Amplification certainly creates unnecessary and excessive noise in our neighborhood. We hope the Commission will understand this and abide by its own ordinances. In summary, we oppose amplification and ask the Commission to seriously take the surrounding neighbors' rights to privacy and quiet of enjoyment into account. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I missed your address. You had stated. it to be-
835 Tiburon Boulevard.
Thank you.
Hello, council members. My name is Matthew Trotter. I'm an attorney living in San Francisco, and my fiance and I have a wedding planned at the Landmarks Art and Garden Center for August that we are incredibly excited about. It's a contract that we've had locked in place for over a year now. We've spent, tens of thousands of dollars on various deposits all around to bring, money into Tiburon at, the hotels, at local places to have, our reception and things of that nature. And we want to express our incredibly strong support for the Landmarks application for the conditional use permit. We think that the Landmarks Art and Garden Center has already gone, out of their way to make a number of accommodations to local residents, including an already incredibly early curfew time of 8:30. They've expressed a number of other ways in which they plan to further accommodate neighbors' concerns. And on top of that, I think also the distinction between amplified and non-amplified music is somewhat arbitrary, as the Landmarks presentation suggested. Whether it's going through a speaker, I think does not necessarily indicate what the proposed sound level will be. You could think of an all drumming band, a marching band, a mariachi. I know a number of other examples were thrown out, but I think moderate music in a respectful manner is, incredibly important. And I know, at least from our perspective, where music not to be allowed, we would have to completely pull out. We'd be left scrambling with only a few months before our wedding to completely reinvent everything that we've worked so hard, that we've been dreaming so hard about. And, on top of that, tens of thousands of dollars of funds that we've poured into making this day special in the way that, we want it to be. We, in our own sense, we would be more than happy to, accommodate a number of the proposed requests or the proposed modifications that the Landmarks has suggested to modify and to accommodate neighbors' concerns. But if there was an outright ban on amplified music, we would, have to pull our deposit and would be, in the hole for, tens of thousands of dollars, which, as a young couple trying to, find a footing, would be an incredibly massive setback and a really, really huge hardship to us. Thank you.
Just curious, how many guests are you expecting?
We are expecting around 130.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask
Oh,
you a
one
how are you guys planning right now? I'm sure there's a lot of things you're trying to figure out.
Yes.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you so
Um,
much.
How are you going to deal with parking? 130 guests, theoretically, not all 130 are taking cars.
No, so we're going to be exclusively using a shuttle service. We're going to tell our guests that they're not going to be allowed to park anywhere, that would impact neighbors. We're going to be hiring an entire shuttle service to, coordinate that. On top of that, we have booked a wedding block at the Lodge at Tiburon. So I think we'll be coordinating that mostly through there. A lot of our guests are coming from out of town and will be staying there. So there, won't be a lot of car traffic to begin with.
And as it exists right now, I know it's probably still in development. What is the plan for the evening? It's your event's scheduled to start at 4 or 5?
Yes, I believe around that time. And again, there's a hard out time of 8:30 where we'll be moving to actually the bungalow to, have our reception there.
So what will happen? The ceremony will be, I'm getting far too in the weeds. I'm just trying to, sorry. Not sure.
Okay, I'm already thinking about all of this.
I want you to invite him.
Would you like an invitation?
Not trying to do that. It sounds awesome, by the way.
Thank you.
But the ceremony will happen there.
Mhm.
Is the plan for you that there would be amplified music starting 6 to 8:30?
I think so, and it would be incredibly limited. Again, there wouldn't be any amplified music during, the ceremony at all. It would only be for that dancing portion, which would be, after dinner and before, I guess to say the real dancing would begin at the bungalow, in an enclosed confined space that we've, rented a room there as well. So, that wouldn't be, I guess, the party for lack of a better term.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
I
Appreciate it.
just follow up, just to piggyback on the
Mhm.
parking question. Was it your understanding just in the contract that parking had to be off-site?
Yes, we were told very explicitly that there was no parking allowed on site and that everything would have to be coordinated through a shuttle service.
Great, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you all for your time.
Thank
Thank you.
Hi, I am Paige Petrini. I work for the Landmark Society and I do all the rentals of all of our facilities for special events. And I really want to clarify about the parking. There's 12 parking spaces at the Art and Garden Center. 2 usually go to the caterer, music, different things, a couple of the family members. There's also a disabled space that we utilize as well. But the parking, as it states in everything that we do, people have to park downtown in one of the 4 lots. I send them a lot description. My favorite one personally is the $5 cash that you put in the little envelope and put in the little box for all day. That's a bargain. With the 4 parking lots, the vendors, well, we have several shuttle companies that work with us. They go and they pick one of those shuttles, one of those parking lots to meet all the guests in. And a lot of times they bring signs. So this myth that people are parking on Gilmartin and all of that, there might be some wait staff that have to be there early to set up. But if there's only the 12 spots. So almost every time you use a shuttle, the only time you don't is when you have about 60 or 70 guests and they hire Marin Valet or one of the other valet services that do, and believe me, they earn their money because it's a lot of red down there in the flatland. They park up there. So there is there's not 120 guests trying to park near the Art and Garden Center. There's just not enough parking. Thank you.
May I ask a question? As part of your contracts, do you require the use of a shuttle service or valet service?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Shauna. My fiance and I are here also here asking for the amended use of the conditional permit. We are also getting married at the venue in August. And I mean, I'm filled with a lot of emotions, especially when the venue had reached out saying that this was potentially something that was going to be, pulled from under us. We are from San Francisco and we have lived there just across the bridge, and we're really excited for this moment. And similarly to the young gentleman before, we have poured tens of thousands of dollars into this just for it to be a lifelong memory with our loved ones, and for it to be, impacted with no music, for important events like cultural things that we, plan to have incorporated within this special day. Things that the venue has done specifically, their commitment to us and to their neighbors was that music would be ended by 8:30. That was made very, very clear to us before we signed any contracts. And personally, what my fiance and I have planned to do was make sure that we had all of our guests off the property by 8 p.m. to make sure that there was absolutely no potential of us exceeding this limit. Even though the Landmark Center requires people to be off the property by 9, we just wanted to make those, extra precautions to make sure something like that was possible. It is also known to us, Paige was someone that we worked really closely with, that they only book one event per weekend. That is so that the neighbors, feel respected. They are not being bombarded every weekend, all summer long. And it is also clear through the presentation that the venue is closed for 87% of the year. That clearly shows that, people within the neighborhood have a lot of opportunities for, peaceful events, for quiet time that they are mentioning. But of course, completely understanding that there are amplified events happening. We are having 65 people at our wedding, and last Paige mentioned parking was also something that was really, really clearly mentioned to us. We are using the valet service that she provided, and we are expecting no more than just 30 vehicles. So that's pretty much what we have to say, and yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, and congratulations to you as well.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Tsai would like to be invited.
You better get the guest list. You
Maybe
better
just
get the gift list first.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't have something prepared. I came here to support Amanda, but I'm Kava Sufer. I'm actually on 16 Gilmorton Drive, so I'm kitty corner to what it is. So I appreciate everything that's been shared today. I appreciate the folks from San Francisco from coming out here and speaking about how they're going to have a wedding and what a special event it is. But I've been at the house I'm in since 1999. I'm shocked to hear that there was no conditional or approval to have loud music played at. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous right now. I'm just a little bit frazzled, but the fact of the matter is I've been there since 1999. I have had so many birthdays, special events that have actually been ruined by the Landmark Society because I have friends over and then all of a sudden loud music will go on. People will be making toasts, having an event. So there's no consideration for me that lives there, yet we're sitting here and we're considering events for people in San Francisco who want to come over here and enjoy themselves. As far as parking goes, I've heard a number of times somebody's been adamant about telling me there's no parking on Gilmartin. No, there's people parking on Gilmartin every single week. Many times their parking is encroaching into my driveway as well, where I had struggled to be able to get out of my own driveway, and it's a safety issue as well. So I'm adamant against this. If Landmark has made a commitment to some of these young couples who want to get married or have those sort of events, I would be open to compromise to allow something like that to happen, or would be supportive of that as long as it did not carry on into next year. I can understand that they've made contracts with these sort of individuals as a whole as well. But I've had so many events that have been ruined. My house is right next door to that as well. And what I don't want to do is start having to play loud music along my fence line below 60 decibels, which will encroach on Landmark's fence line as well during those events as well and cause disruption for those individuals. So.
To clarify, you're saying if you play music in your yard, it's interfering with or you're saying you're concerned it would be?
Well, I need to drown out the sound of the music that's coming through. I'm going to play music myself.
Oh, I see. Okay. Anyone else have any questions? No? Thank you very much. Anyone else in the audience wish to speak?
Good evening. I'm Peter Brooks. I'm from the west end of Tiburon, and I'm very attached to the garden for lots of reasons we don't need to get into. This makes me sad because I realize the neighbors have a totally legitimate issue. You know, I'm a homeowner here too. I just would like to put out to the council, to my neighbors, to my town folks, you know, I live in a neighborhood too. We have the market, you know, within a house of me, and we hear trucks and we hear cars and we hear events at the Cove Shopping Center or the Cove Apartments. You know, I don't know if it's 10 weekends a summer, but we hear noise too. We have 2 schools nearby. We have the synagogue nearby. People park in front of our house. I consider it part of being part of this community. I'm sad about this because I think you have a very tough job, and I can't help to think that without that income, the lovely white church up there, I'm not sure how it's going to happen. I'm not saying it will go down, but I know the numbers of how these buildings are supported, and I know that that's how it's happening. And it really makes me sad to think that we might lose not only that garden, but several others. So it's a huge job. It's a huge problem. And I wish you luck.
Thank you. Thanks for the luck. Anyone else present in the room would like to speak before we move to persons on video conference? I'm seeing no motion. Oh, wait, one more.
Good evening. I'm Helen Lindquist. I have been here for many years and I have come to lend support to Landmarks to continue holding weddings and other events at this Art and Garden Centre. I can perhaps lend a little historical note to your questions about noise, because I've been with the Landmarks or connected to them for many, many years. And when events first started at the Landmarks, at the Art and Garden Centre, the Landmarks provided an amplifier for the people renting to make their announcements. And I guess it devolved into technology getting better. It wasn't a very wonderful amplifier, but the wedding guests are acquiring a little more in the technology line. It moved on to bigger speakers, and we did not provide any more, so it was beholden to the wedding renters to provide their own music, amplifiers, microphones, or whatever they were using. Our last speaker mentioned that living in the neighborhood, especially in the daytime, between, what are these hours talking about? A busy Saturday between 12 noon and 10 o'clock at night, there are many, many noises. You have people using blowers, lawnmowers, and one does not expect to be able to sit in silent solitude and enjoy your patio at that time. And the community is usually abuzz on a Saturday, and trucks are rumbling, there's all sorts of noise. For many years, I live up above the TPC, and they have parties. I also hear the grand parties that happen at the yacht club, the Corinthian Yacht Club. It's like a bowl of Old Tiburon there, and the sound carries up magnificently. But I treat it as people enjoying an event. And I wish some of these neighbors would be more friendly to people enjoying the little town that we live in, and encouraging our wedding people to rent here, because it really supports the whole town. You have people using the hotels, the restaurants, and it benefits the whole town, not just a non-profit society. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to just say one really quick thing. I'm a Tiburon resident. I wrote one of the letters.
What's your name?
Peggy Hodge, Hodge. I'm also a gardener at the garden. And I think what's in front of us is a very nice proposal. These people are very unhappy with the noise level. The garden is proposing to lower the noise level to what is acceptable in several other venues. I'm just saying, it looks like we have a nice compromise if everybody gives a little. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Again.
No. Okay, well, let's turn to our video conferencing. Chris, do we see anyone who would like to speak present on Zoom?
I currently have one hand raised. I'm going to turn on the audio for Mr. O'Connor.
Hello there. Can you guys hear me just fine?
We hear you, but it's very quiet.
I'm not too sure why that is. Is that any better at all?
It's a little better. Speak as loudly as you can. I think that'll help.
Okay, that's definitely not a problem. So I don't live in your area of Tiburon, but since '98, I've been doing construction. I own my own construction business in the construction field. And since 1998, all the way from Sausalito, all the way up to Sonoma County line, we've done street projects. We've done the underground sewage in Sausalito. We've worked in Tiburon for paving. We've done everything, Mill Valley, all over the place. The schools, junior highs, you name it. A lot of what happens is even during the day, we get complaints for noise for doing construction. My daughter's getting married in September at the Art and Garden Center that I've been at many, many times. I've never seen a business like the Art and Garden Center try to do so much to help the neighbors and try to accommodate the neighbors, and yet have the neighbors be not so accommodating back. There's got to be a middle ground someplace, because this is a business that has been there, and some of the buildings have been there longer than some of us have even been around or even alive. So by them not able to do their weddings, that business will eventually go away. They will not be able to stay there anymore. They will have to leave because they won't have the funding. So I understand. So we've had, I'm not knocking what the neighbors are saying, but if neighbors are blocking your driveways and whatnot, I went to the Tiburon Police Department. I spoke with them. They have not had anything on record that states that there's been any major complaints of people parking, majorly blocking driveways, parking in driveways, leaving broken glass, leaving broken bottles, fights, anything like that have been major, at least the past 10 to 15 years. So if you also noise carries up into the air. I'm in semis. I also am a crane operator. So when we're digging into the ground, whether we are using a compactor, whether we are using a roller, it depends. The decimals during the day are higher than 60 decimals. It's just natural. Now, if the Art and Garden Center is saying, hey, in our contract, you cannot go above 60 decimals, and we're going to have somebody standing right there that's going to warn that DJ one time, and if the DJ does it again, we're going to shut it off. I feel that's pretty darn good, because they're not saying we're going to shut the DJ off and you're going to get your money back. They're saying we're going to shut the DJ off, and if you guys leave the wedding, that's on you, because we have made an agreement with the neighbors. We've made an agreement with the city. We've done everything we've needed to get this permit to allow us to have the weddings this year and continue on. And if you're not willing to abide by our rules, we're going to shut down your wedding, or at least we're going to take away your music, which will shut down your wedding. That is very big of that company, the Art and Garden Center, to do that, to try to accommodate the neighbors. The neighbors, if you look at the picture that he showed, where the music is amplified, where the speaker is going towards the dance center, the dance floor, the music is actually going towards the street. So the people that live above the street, of course, they're going to hear that music, because the music is going towards the street. But again, if anyone is outdoors and they're playing any kind of music in their own backyard, you're going to hear that music as well. So I believe another compromise could be, maybe there's certain type of music that you're not allowed to play. Like maybe all the music has to be clean music with no cursing or anything like that. But again, my name is Mr. O'Connor. My daughter is getting married there in Tiburon in September this year. I have been working construction in your town since 1998, in the middle of doing a $25 million home in the town of Ross. And I know how strict all your towns are. I know you guys are very good about what time we can start, what time we can end, but unfortunately, we always get complaints no matter what it is, and there's nothing we can do about it. But if the company, if the business is willing to compromise, I feel that the neighbors can compromise as well. They're only doing it, 7 months out the year, and maybe 3 weekends out the month, Friday, Saturday, maybe some Sundays. So if
Okay,
that,
so
yes,
we
ma'am.
forgot to start your timer when you started, but I know it's been 3 minutes when I
Yes.
started it late. So if you have one last very short thought, please summarize real quick, but otherwise your time is up.
So mainly my thing is that if we can all compromise, I think it'll work. If you're gonna, if to say no to amplified music, a mariachi band is louder than amplified music. Live bands are louder than amplified music. So we're going to have a compromise here somewhere. And I believe that the Art and Garden Center is trying to do that so they can accommodate the neighbors, the city, and themselves to keep themselves alive.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, Chris, we have someone else in the audience presently. Let's check video conferencing first.
There are no more public comments from the Zoom audience.
Okay, well, let's move back then to the room since we have someone who would like to speak.
She's with the applicant.
Well, you
Yeah,
do
she is the
you do
applicant.
get a rebuttal.
Yeah, there's a rebuttal if they're.
So you do get time anyway. Okay. Okay, so seeing no one else and there's nothing on video conferencing, I'm going to close the public comment period, which brings us back to the applicant. And you get 5 minutes for your rebuttal. Yes, 5 minutes, yeah. We'll put the timer over here, yeah.
Thank you again, Mark Freiberg here. I don't have particular comments, but having heard the comments from the public here, there were events described that honestly, I don't recognize. And I think the only way to solve this, you've heard that these events mean a lot to the town in terms of money, business, liveliness of Tiburon, popularity of Tiburon. You've heard it means the world to these couples and they're counting on it, relying on it. I would suggest the answer is to let us go forward with the schedule in 2025 as in contract already with these couples. Have us do the sound level monitoring and the various changes we've said we would do, and have planning division staff there to determine what does it really sound like to a human being, because you're hearing a very different description than anything I'm recognizing. I also say I happen to be a retired certified industrial hygienist. You can look up later what that means, but I've done a lot of noise monitoring myself. I did see one letter that came in very late, I think today, that seemed to be, when I read it, is from an acoustic engineer specialist. It seemed to be criticizing the town for not having an appropriate standard for noise. Seemed just wrong to me. And I just wanted to say that I didn't understand what that letter was getting at. The town has standards. We're definitely aware of them and trying to follow them. I'll turn it over to Patty, to John, our acoustic specialist, next then.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is John Laverty with Westside Acoustics. I did the acoustic study for this facility. I believe that I want to make a couple of comments to the speakers themselves that are being used. The speakers that the DJ brought out are small in nature, 8-inch size speakers. So we are not talking about large concert systems or things like this. The levels at the venue were measured inside the venue, both on the lawn and on the dance area. And they were in the 70s, which is not concert levels as you would normally see or hear. We did measurements at the property lines and showed conformance with the requirements set forth by the city, which is what we were set out to do. And we made sure that the provisions within the documents that you are looking at earlier would meet the requirements set forth in the city of Tiburon's requirements as we understood them and interpreted them. So that was really our goals, was to make sure that all of the items that you were asking for and the city was asking for were met and satisfied, and I'm happy to answer any technical questions that may arise.
Okay. Anything else from applicant? Yes, Patty?
Patty Flax again. I'd just like to say, comment that what I think Peggy Hodge said earlier makes a lot of sense to me. I am certainly empathetic to what our neighbors experience when we have an event on the property. There's no denying that there is noise, but I think we've worked really hard to accommodate the neighbors and acknowledge what they've told us. And I think that with this plan going forward and that meets the conditions specified, I think it's a very good compromise.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions for Patty while she's still there?
I have a couple of questions. It can be frankly for anyone for from Landmarks. So the original CUP, which the gentleman who originally spoke, I think addressed this somewhat earlier, did not allow amplified sound.
That's correct.
I really need to understand why you guys started using amplified sound. If it was pretty clearly set out in the 97
Yeah.
CUP that you couldn't do it.
I wish that I could answer that question, but it was way before my time. And by the time I joined Landmarks in 2016, we had a vendor list that included DJs. It was just common. I think we've been doing it honestly for decades. So I can't answer when there was a transition or if there was a moment when they said, oh, well, let's just have amplified music.
Do you guys currently have, I think it's in at least what staff has recommended, a positioning of where the speaker would be. And it was something about perpendicular to the stone wall. I take that as street facing.
That's correct.
What are the conditions right now that you guys have as to where speakers can go?
So when I was doing the events, the place that we had speakers on the dance floor, we had 2 speakers and we'd face them out toward the water. What the sound test showed was that noise travels a little more that way. And if you have one speaker that's just facing out toward the water, it concentrates the music where it needs to be and doesn't travel as much. And maybe John can speak to the science of that, but I can't.
So the distinction I think you're making is between 1 versus
2.
2? Okay, I see.
And placement as well.
Okay. And the current CUP allows for events, I think on what is it, Saturday, Sunday, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, something like that. But what you have been doing is restricting the events to conclude, I think one of the speakers said 8:30.
So currently, the CUP allows us to have events Monday through Thursday until 10 p.m., Friday and Saturday until 11 p.m. As it is, we only hold events one day on the weekend, typically a Saturday, very rarely a Sunday, and infrequently on Fridays. And we have a hard stop on music at 8:30 with guests off property by 9 and all vendors off property by 10.
Have you had any weddings that are on a day other than Saturday or Sunday, maybe Friday, Saturday, or Sunday?
Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, most often Saturdays.
Have you had any that are not on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday?
Maybe in my tenure, 1 or 2 during a weekday. Yes, there's a ceremony only. So I'll repeat that for everyone. Paige piped up and said that if it's during the week, they're considered an elopement and they might be a 3-hour event. It's ceremony only.
Without anyone knowing, I assume. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Williams, Commissioner Woodward? Any questions for the?
Yeah, maybe I have 1 or 2, I guess. So many questions. Earlier in the beginning presentation, you guys had talked about the pricing of it. I think there was questions around, like where the money goes. Can you talk just a little bit about how you arrived at the pricing of the events? It's been a long time since I planned a wedding. It feels like maybe a really good deal or, like a not very expensive. Is that somewhat tied to the hours that you're limiting people to? In other words, if it went to 11 o'clock, you might be able to charge more. Or if you could have, larger crowds, but have you tested the pricing at all? I'm just really curious about that.
That's a great question. So we are priced very competitively, and we may seem like we're a great deal, but what you need to take into account is that we are requiring our guests to shuttle guests to and from the venue, which adds a couple $1,000s easily to the cost of an event. We also require that for parties over 80, extra porta potties are brought in because we only have 2 bathrooms. And so that's another very large expense to the client. So we positioned ourselves so that when you're looking at our venue versus other venues, we're competitive. So the site fee might seem low, and it is if you just look site fee to site fee, but you need to take into consideration the other items that the couples are having to pay for.
And given the hours of the venues, is it typical, we heard from one of the couples here, that while they'll have some reception at the event, that the real party will go on at another venue? Would that be typical, or like are there ability for you guys to capture more of that if you stayed open later, did events later?
We would definitely be able to capture more, but I don't think we'd want to do that to our neighbors. So many of our clients will have after parties in downtown Tiburon. We've had clients who rented out the entire inn on the water. They'll have their after party there. They'll have it at Bungalow. They'll have it at Sam's. So because of the early stop on music and the early end of the event, many of our clients are going downtown Tiburon, and for those who aren't done.
I have a question. A number of the letters talk about the things that you have been doing to address the noise issue, limiting the number of events, the total number of events, and ending music at 8. I don't see any of that in the conditions of approval specified. But I see them in the repeatedly in the correspondence, and you've referenced them tonight. Does the correspondence capture all that you are doing? And I'm asking because I am specifically thinking about how we frame our conditions of approval. These are effective measures that you've put in place that you have agreed, you have initiated.
We believe so.
And that have been mitigating. But I don't know that I
think
have
so.
all of them because I'm just seeing them throughout correspondence.
I think one of our slides
Oh, you're right.
addresses that.
You're right. It was in a slide. Yeah, thank you. I don't have the PowerPoint presentation, but you did address that in the slide.
But in the slide, not in the,
It's not in the
put
staff memo
you're
or
right.
in but it is a part of it is under consideration.
It's in your
So we could
packet,
pull
yeah.
the slide back up and look at that. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Sorry, do we have a minute remaining, or is that it now for our?
I guess technically you could have one more minute because we interrupted you with a lot of questions and there was a minute left. Yes,
Okay, so
no problem.
Mark Freiberg again, and if I could just wrap up then to close this out. What we're asking for, to be clear, is that the amendment be approved to include sound level monitoring that we're going to do, and that we, therefore be able to tell these couples that they can go ahead and plan for their wedding in Tiburon, and that we circle back and see how things go. And again, I would suggest that we actually have planning department staff as neutral bodies in this evaluation, determine what does it actually sound like to a human being. It's one thing to hear numbers. It's another thing to experience sometimes speech versus car sound. That's a legitimate distinction. But primarily, we're asking for the amendment to be approved, and we're asking to be able to have some certainty around the wedding schedule for this year, and then we can see how things go.
And Mark, just to follow up on Commissioner Williams' question earlier, could we put the slide back up with those constraints? Is that possible? And then, so just confirming, ending music by 8:30.
Mm-hmm.
Guests off property by 9 o'clock.
Do I have control yet?
You will in just a moment. I'm also going to share it so anyone watching at home is able to see
Okay.
what's being reviewed.
Please stand by.
You should, once I take all this stuff out.
I can't, the tricky thing is I don't remember if it's before or after this slide, but there, beautiful. Oh, you had it.
Is that the slide you're looking for?
Mm-hmm.
So ending music by 8:30, notifying our neighbors, any neighbor, anybody who considers themselves a neighbor who wants to be notified can give us their email address and they'll get the notification. Enforcing the end times, guests off property by 9, vendors off by 10, rental deliveries and pickups Friday and Monday rather than the weekend.
Maybe we
That
could leave
seems-
this up just for our purposes of our deliberation.
Those would seem to be the gives that apply going forward to wedding events.
Yeah, that's the list we had
Okay.
in mind. Yeah, thank you.
And just confirming, you've shared this list with all neighbors.
This
and-
list?
Yeah.
This slide that I made up, no, has not been shared with all neighbors, but anybody who's interested and has shown up or zoomed in is seeing it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay, so that concludes the presentations, and we're going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for comment and discussion. So there's a lot to unpack here. I would like to, usually the chair speaks last, that is our tradition, but I would like to suggest that we address the weddings that are already scheduled before we dig into other details. And here's my thinking. We have considered other issues over the years in which activities are occurring that are not permitted by the conditional use permit. And very similar scenarios in which the neighbors, some of them are okay with it, some are not so okay with it, but there's a lot of conciliatory conversations going on. And it has never been the Planning Commission's desire to just rip away the ongoing activity, particularly when we think we can reach a nice meeting space between the parties who need that. So I just want to open it up initially, since we have people here worried about their weddings. They're here from San Francisco. Some of them drove all the way in. Can we talk about that first, if I can
Well,
ask the commission?
But it might be that as we talk through what we plan to do with the conditional, if we plan to talk through the specific terms of the conditional use permit, that may address some of that issue. I'm inclined to see where we end up after sharing our thoughts more broadly, and that may address that concern. It's hard to carve those out, separately from the larger discussion initially.
Yeah, it is a process mentally for
But
sure.
I hear your point, which is
Yeah.
there's this current sort of wedding season and people with contracts and expectations and have made plans. And I think that's an important factor. There are so many important factors here.
Yeah, well, then maybe my preliminary comment that we have no intention to have anyone's wedding be canceled. Maybe that's as far as I can go with it, but then we can unpack it. Maybe that's the
I
best.
don't mind just jumping in. with
Go ahead. Commissioner Williams, you want to start? Please.
Unless
go
anyone
ahead.
else, Commissioner Woodward. It's such a difficult issue, and the noise issues in particular are always very challenging. And I think my sense, there's often there's not really a right or a wrong perspective. There are many perspectives. And it's often about finding a balance and acknowledging the real impacts that are occurring in people's lives. On the commission, when we look at conditional use permits, we have very specific factors that we look at under the municipal code, and it kind of becomes a balancing act. We're looking at the impact on neighbors. We're looking at benefits to community, the public interest individually and as a community, how people are impacted. So these are really difficult questions, and they're very emotional for people. And I just want to acknowledge that I could really sense across the board that this is an important issue for everyone here. And I think Peter Brooks was so, his point about this is, it's sad that we can't, there's no easy answer. And it's hard, it's very difficult. And I think we take this very seriously. So that's why we've asked a lot of questions, and we're really trying to grapple with this. And I just want to kind of share my thinking about this and hear from my fellow commissioners. But just acknowledge, thank you so much for being here. And we do recognize how difficult this is and how it's personal to each and every one of you. And it's not easy to get up and share that. So my sense is, just to refer to something that Peggy said, Peggy Hodge, and one of the questions I had is, we haven't tested, there are a lot of ideas on the table that haven't been tested. And I'm inclined to see if we can craft some conditions of approval that incorporate what is happening, kind of codify those, because we don't want those to get lost. Maybe not all of them, but a number of them. I have integrate the recommendations of the sound that came out of the sound study. I have some additional measures that I've been tracking as I'm hearing from people. Incorporate those into our conditional use permit. Set a review period that's reasonable. We don't want this going continually, or checking in more regularly will be very important so that people feel heard, their issues are addressed, things can be tinkered with. I do see a lot of compromise actually all around, because I do think the Landmark Society has made adjustments where they feel they can. And I also have heard the neighbors who are impacted writing in with ideas. Could please consider this additional measure. And so I think there's a lot of room for compromise, and I actually think people are coming with a desire to compromise. They're also feeling emotional about it, and so it's challenging for all of you, I recognize. So my idea is, if we can just see if there's any consensus around some of these, and I can just, we have these items here. I'm kind of thinking through maybe not including things after the summer camp and below, because that's just other little accommodations that are being made for neighbors. Integrating what shows up now on your new contract, those sound levels, bringing the sound levels, the decibel levels down, and then adding in some additional measures, which is an in-person monitor at events, more expansive notification, so notifying these additional neighbors. Parking enforcement, I don't think there's any issue that that you're inviting people to park on site, but people may be parking on or near the site, or near the site on Tiburon Boulevard or Gilmartin. So better enforcement of that. I think just the general sort of how do you address where people are parking because they just want to get close up to the site. It's believable to me that people would just park right in front of the site. I've actually seen that. I walk on the path a lot, and I have seen people park out there. We can talk about whether or not a planning department staff member would be there, or if we're just an in-person monitor. Maybe Commissioner Tsai, maybe he'll volunteer to be a monitor. And I just think it's clear that we really try to get all of these points in a conditional use permit. Test these measures, see how it goes, give the folks with contracts some certainty. So run this, through this year, but come back and see how it's working, if it's working, and if there's room for improvement. That's my thinking.
Commissioner Woodward.
No.
Especially contrarian, always.
Yeah. No, I agree with a lot of the things that Commissioner Williams said. I tried to distill this down. I think there's sort of 5 key topics: parking, noise, frequency of events, timing, and the notification. I think some of those are very easily addressed, and there's been solutions already proposed here. Certainly, like notification should be a no-brainer. I actually have a different idea on notification, but we can kind of come back to that when we try to problem solve through these. But I do think, as you talked about, I mean, the definition of a conditional use permit is not supposed to be created in 1997 and revisited some almost 30 years later. And so, having an actual defined period of time where we come back to effectively assess these different ideas that were potential to propose. And I do think The thing I'm probably most bummed, if I can use that term about, is that, like there are a number of great ideas. It sounds like some of the neighbors might have been in favor or accepting of the ideas. Sounds like some of them were shared, some of them weren't. And unfortunately, you guys weren't able to come to a consensus before you got in front of us. So we don't really know. We're going to disappoint someone. We always do. But, we don't really know quite how disappointing it's going to be. Although I think we heard some really good points of view. And certainly I, for one, at least am swayed by the location of the people who have to live with this every weekend, as opposed to the location of the people who come to visit and use the center on occasion. So I do want to take that into account. I think there's sort of a heavier weighting in that sense. But again, I think there's probably a middle ground to be had here, and I'm certainly open to going through that. But I would like to hear from my fellow commissioners first before we maybe try to problem solve.
Commissioner Sai.
So, we confront issues. I think Commissioner Williams spoke about this, and she was absolutely right. We've confronted this issue quite a bit in different forms, whether it's this or pickleball or beekeeping actually also came up too. And the movie plays out the exact same way in terms of where people and how people are situated. It's just different issues ultimately. What I think is interesting about this particular one, it's the question that I asked the landmarks folks, and I think the answer they gave me was exceedingly honest, which is really all we want, which was, why did landmarks not comply with the CUP that was pretty clear since 1997 that no amplification was allowed? I thought the answer was an honest one. By the way, it happens a lot. We don't know why, and it was not on purpose. Ultimately, I do think that the use of amplification for these events, it sounds like it's pretty much only for weddings, has been a practice that has been going on so long that it would be difficult to say we can't do it anymore. So I'm most likely going to be inclined to allow some, at least for my vote, amplification. I do think that, consistent with what the other two commissioners just spoke about, that there are common sense restrictions that should be employed here, because what I find compelling about what some of the neighbors have said tonight is a little different from other situations we faced and where I voted in different ways. I've never have been a believer, at least sitting as a commissioner on this commission for a few years, that it's the number of complaints, whether it's in person or in paper, that makes a difference. That's to me, a non-serious way of looking at these things. The quality of comments that people have is meaningful. And what's very important to me here is that the Art and Garden Center was originally a house. It was originally where people lived, and it's in a residential community. It was never designed to be an athletics complex. It was never a bar or a restaurant. So almost by definition, for us to accommodate what the Art and Garden Center is today, and again, I'm of the belief that I think we need to, for a lot of reasons, including the value it brings to the community and the economic benefit it has for the community. It also means that we need to tweak things in such a way that we would not necessarily do for a downtown restaurant or bar. One thing that I think we might want to consider is, based on some of these things, I've already heard a few, not surprisingly, that I know I'm going to agree with in terms of possible restrictions or issues. Many of them are already there that the landmarks folks have already started to do, is to potentially, I'm not saying we should necessarily do this tonight, but potentially have them work on some of these and come back to us and evaluate whether they will work. The only reason I'm saying it like that, and that's just for folks to think about, is because some of the things that we come up with tonight might be things that y'all can live with. They might be things that you cannot live with. And I think it's important for us to hear, while you've had a time to think about it, to come back and let us know if that's the case. I'll give you an example. One of the things that I found compelling, and it didn't sound contradicted, but if it is, someone can correct me because I want the facts to be right, that there are a lot of these events. I think the number was 20. It could be every weekend, something to that effect. That is a lot. And so one of the issues, I'm using this as an example that I was thinking about, is should there be a common sense restriction on the number of the events? That to me is an example where I could give my own just shoot from the hip kind of answer, but you guys need to think about things like, how is this going to impact our bottom line? Maybe it works, maybe it does not work at all. And that's putting aside, I think, the schedule that exists for 2025. I'm inclined to grandfather those in regardless for this year. But I do think that you guys should deserve the opportunity to think about things like that and hear from us tonight as to where we're thinking on some of those things. So that's one example. I'll also just list off the other ones that were meaningful to me. The other one is decibel levels. So it sounds like, and again, the gentleman who did the study, we have seen you before.
Yes.
I knew it. Knew it. We should put him on staff. He's here a lot. Appreciate the study that you did. What we found from the numbers is that they're pretty close to the limit. And so that is, there was a comment that I appreciated, which was, hey, let's get someone from planning, an actual human being to hear it. I mean, the reality is the neighbors who live contiguously and otherwise are human beings too, right? So they hear this stuff too. And that it's not a criticism. All I mean to say when I say that is what we know is that the number is 60. You could be at 60 or 59 and it's still be in that sense technically right or compliant in that sense, but maybe still not right? And so one of the things that I'm thinking of in terms of my own list is, should that number be lower, putting aside what the town already permits? The other issue that I was thinking about related to that is, would it make sense? And again, I'm directing all my comments right now to the Landmarks folks, because in some ways I want you guys to consider, you don't have to do it now, but think about, would this work for us or could this not work for us? It could be, for example, the other issue for me is almost a restriction within the time that an event occurs when amplified sound could be used. Does it make sense? Could that work for the folks who have weddings planned? I don't know. But to me, these are the kinds of things I think we need to be thinking about, because I don't find this scenario precisely the same as some of our other commercial establishments who, for example, want to use amplified sound. And then the last comment I'll make is enforcement of existing conditions. I am not that moved by the idea that there are real issues with parking. I think that the Landmarks folks know, and it's pretty clear they know, that parking is a serious issue. I'm persuaded by the fact that they are in good faith getting shuttles, getting valets. The one thing I'll say, and staff we can later talk about it as needed, or now, whatever, it's fine with me, is I don't know the extent to which we can place restrictions that would prevent people, the members of the public, anyone, from using Gilmartin to park. I mean, I live on a street where when there's a school event, that happens. Maybe yes, again, maybe no, I don't know. Sounds like it's a no. Okay. So
It's a public right away.
it's a public right away, right? So I am not inclined to try to put anything that would restrict people from using Gilmartin. It's a street. I do think, however, that Landmarks, they've I think frankly already been doing it, is really making sure that the folks who are using your facility understand what they can do and what they can't do, or what they should do and shouldn't do. And that includes the use of Gilmartin in that particular way.
Or cones. I think it sounds like you already are doing cones.
Yeah.
So that sort of thing, where
Mhm.
that's just a part of this.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I'll conclude with that. Again, I am inclined to approve amplified sound. It's despite the fact that it's pretty clearly in the CUP, as opposed to other situations where it has been ambiguous as to whether or not certain things are permitted. That said, it has been so long in which amplified sound has been used, I don't see a reasonable scenario where suddenly amplified sound is not used. I just don't see it. So I'm inclined to, in that regard, be in favor of it, but I do think those restrictions, and I would again suggest for the commission to think about, is placing some of those things at the feet of Landmarks for them to come back and let us know whether they would work. Because I'm afraid of us doing something that frankly, we think makes sense, but ultimately may not work. And that's not going to be a good solution at the end of the day.
Just
Thank you,
one clarifying question for Commissioner Sai, and then just one point is I agree, I absolutely agree that compromises or conditions that are kind of worked out by the involved parties are always the most durable, as opposed to us arbitrarily trying to enforce things. But Claire, so it sounds like the two things that you've put to Landmarks to consider are the number of events per year, weddings per year, and potential time limits on when amplified sound is used. I noticed you had asked questions earlier of someone who has a wedding coming up. When are you going to be using the amplified sound? When will we be dancing? But that's just one couple.
And that was it was my reason. I realized when I was asking the questions how invasive those questions were, but it was really designed to try to figure out what's the norm and the practice of how sound is actually used at these events. One other thing, but I will say to your comment and questions too, that some of this will be also something I would think Landmarks wants to talk to their audio expert about, because one of the other issues, which I apologize, I may not have mentioned, is another potential restriction could be restriction on the type of speaker that is allowed. And again, I don't know what that would mean one way or the other, but I think that the issue of decibel level and a possible restriction on the type of speaker use seems to me that could have a positive impact. But again, I think it's something that would need some exploring with the expert.
Before our chair goes, could I just might have a clarifying question? I think I know the answer to, but confirming, we're really just talking about the extra conditional use here of amplified music. And so barring anything else, the Landmarks could have daily weddings going with mariachi bands and drummers until 10 p.m. and 11 o'clock on the weekends. So no matter what we do here, that won't prohibit.
We can add in.
Well, unless we revise the CUP.
Yeah, which is what I was proposing. I'm proposing that we actually integrate these into the CUP.
I happen to agree with that. But I mean, I think that there is.
They're working too.
Yeah, I think it's important to be more clear as opposed to less clear in a CUP.
Yeah, okay. So I just want to make sure that
I think this was just a reflection of the fact that they were mostly transferring over from the old CUP and not, just these were not controversial. But I think for clarity for the future commission, have it all in one document. You've done the hard work of kind of starting to refine these.
We
The public
can't,
the public
it's-
hearing's
it's
closed.
closed now, yeah.
Sorry.
No, sorry. Okay. Yeah, so what we have in front of us is making changes. I think since I'm last, I can say this safely. We're all in agreement that we're not trying to, we're happy to grandfather in what's already on the schedule with the current restrictions that Landmarks has already put upon themselves to make sure that it's as respectful as possible, and maybe even more respectful than that if there's something you can do when the neighbor reaches out. Of course, it's a balancing act because you need to honor the contract that you have with someone who has booked something.
Clarification, though, I don't think we're grandfather. I think that this conditional use permit, the new, should apply to this
It's not
2025
technically
season.
not a
So the lower decibel level. Yeah, so it's not like we're saying it's a free,
From a
do
legal
anything you want because there's no.
From a legal standpoint, it's not a grandfathering. I'll make that clear. There's 3 lawyers up here, so. So no, from a legal standpoint, it is not grandfathering it in, but from a conceptualization, we're allowing those to stand. And then working out how to go forward to reflect what the neighbors have told us today. So we are listening 100%. And as my co-commissioners have pointed out, we get a lot of sound issues in front of us in this town because, you know, we're a densely packed town. So you can imagine that would happen a lot, including cell phones. I hear one in the back. Just kidding. I'm picking on you. It's always a compromise. It's always a compromise because we live amongst businesses and neighbors. And even though the Landmark Society is not technically a business, but also not a facility, as Commissioner Sy pointed out, you know, we have sports facilities as well that produce noise. It's just whatever the concept, whatever the format that the noise producing entity is in, we recognize those different attributes to each one. It is important. But at the end of the day, we just have to find something that is a nice balance for everyone involved. So,
and I just
we
wanted to
do want to
acknowledge too,
recognize the neighbors.
Yeah, and I do think, and I agreed with the point I think Commissioner Woodward made about the impact to immediate neighbors is a really critical thing for us to think about. But I also wanted to I wanted to acknowledge the value of landmarks to the community and what we all get from how we benefit as a community from these historical resources and cultural resources, and not just the activities, but the buildings and the history. And I just wanted to acknowledge that because I do think that's something that we get to think about as we're looking through our municipal code factors, you know, and considering the CUP.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. This is
yeah.
a very different situation.
Yeah, and nonprofit organizations can generate revenue. They can operate as a business. They just can't pay it out to their shareholders. It just has to go back into the business. So, for integrating these items here, there is number 18 of the current, the resolution as drafted. It's Exhibit B. That speaks to the hours of operation, but it doesn't get as granular as this. And I think we could follow that with this, you know, hard stop for music. And kind of start to layer these in. You know, there, if it makes sense. I mean, a lot of this is about stuff that happened. It's like construction stuff. So much of it is so historic.
Yeah, thank you for that, because we do want to recognize that the Landmark Society is a very different entity that has a lot of impact, a lot of positive impact that maybe other entities do not. I'm not saying sports facilities or businesses don't, but the Landmark Society is very special. They preserve our history. They teach people, you know, nice cultural knowledge and hobbies, the gardening and the art, and it's a wonderful thing. Absolutely, we 100% put that into our balance, and we recognize that that is very different here, which I think is part of the reason you're hearing the commissioners. I mean, everyone in this room doesn't attend all of our meetings, but I'm hearing more of a leaning toward understanding of how we got to where we are because the Landmark Society is so critical to our town. It's such an integral cultural phenomena, and we're very lucky to have it. So before we go through all of the different points, because I think my co-commissioners have already pointed out, I made a list here as they were speaking, the most important points that we need to determine where we land on these points. I do want to recognize quickly, and the staff and my co-commissioners have heard me say this before, so I apologize for repetition. I also live on a hill, and I understand that sound travels up the bowl, and it is way worse than you think it is, especially if you have never lived on a hill. It's the amphitheater effect, and that's really hard for a sound engineer to actually even put into numbers or integrate into a report in an accurate way. As has been pointed out, nothing really replaces being on the property, like being the neighbor and really understanding what that sounds like. And I live in Tiburon myself because it is quiet. So I recognize 100% what the neighbors are saying and why this is disturbing for them. And it's very hard to reflect that in a sound report, extremely difficult. And the other thing I want to call out is that we do not actually have a sound ordinance in Tiburon. I'm thinking after the many hearings that we've had, maybe we should. Because what we end up doing, it makes the job harder for us up here, because we have to rely on our general plan, which is just guidelines. It's the general plan of what we'd like to do for the next 20 years. Well, the general plan talks about sound and land use compatibilities and noise, but it's recommendations, and they're kind of vague. And they use averaging, which is problematic and has been problematic time after time, because depending on the nature of the sound, the averaging can really discount how much of an impact that sound has on the people who are experiencing it. And we experience this with whether it's pickleball or music at other locations. We've heard this story many times, and so it makes it harder on us. We do like to come out to the locations and hear it ourselves, and unfortunately that wasn't possible for this, but we do welcome that in the future, especially if we're invited to the wedding, right?
Yeah. No, in all seriousness, I was actually going to request notification of the schedule so that we can actually listen to the sound while the event's in progress. We weren't able, site visit was not as meaningful this time. Walking around was helpful, but without a wedding.
Yeah, well, and what usually happens for the information also for the neighbors is that the neighbors will invite us. They'll say, okay, we know when there's going to be a higher sound level, invite us to come and stand in their yard and listen to it. And we will come. We really value being present and understanding what it's really like in those situations. And we also will visit the Landmark Society. So in the future, I'm hoping that maybe we can do that to get a better sense of what we have in front of us. But that leads me back to where we are now. So the sound compatibility guidelines, in my opinion, are not that helpful. So we end up needing to come up with compromises with whatever information we have. I will start so I have a list from listening to the three of you, and you can tell me if I missed something. It sounds like the different criteria we're looking at that we may want to alter or not alter is, I've got 5 of them here. The notifications to neighbors, the on-site monitoring, the frequency of events, the timing of events, and the parking were the top 5. Tell me if I missed something. But I think we need to craft something that is good for now, but then is subject to be reviewed, and then we have to decide when we'd like to review it.
Yeah.
Maybe pending when the weddings are, after maybe a few weddings.
Yeah, what are the first few weddings that are coming up? What are the dates of the weddings? Do we have those dates?
Yeah, we did have
You
them up
do, that's
there.
right.
April 5th.
Wait.
Okay, in the
There.
audience, we heard April 5th. Oh, here we go. We have
There
the
they are.
schedule up.
Okay. So 3 weddings in April, May. I'm sorry, 4 weddings, April, May. So June could be a good time to come back to hear from you. And I think I heard Commissioner Sai saying as to frequency and timing, that was something for Landmarks to consider before we impose anything tonight. Because we're saying that the 2025 schedule is going forward in any
Yeah,
event.
and I wonder if that can be addressed in having them come back.
Exactly.
and a
That's my
review.
thinking, is that's something that we're thinking conceptually that we'll have you come back in just a period of months. And on the frequency issue, how many times per year would you have weddings? And maybe timing around when amplified music is played, you'd report back to us on, the further due diligence that you've done in terms of the feasibility of that. Does that accurately reflect kind of
Yes.
the consensus thinking on those items? Parking, I was so persuaded by Commissioner Sai. I also think where there are parking violations, I do think maybe integrating cones into this, just coning off areas around the entrance, to your property. And then if there are violations, people can call the police department. So there is a way to enforce that. Community members can enforce that if driveways are being blocked, for example. So I'm persuaded that we don't need to spend time on that.
I agree.
Okay.
And then the other, I would suggest we just add in the first 4 bullet points from the previous slide as items after 18. I think it was just music stops. There's a hard stop for music. There's a notification requirement for more expansive notification. When guests are expected to be off the property, and then these pickups on Fridays and Mondays.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with that. I think on the issue of ending music earlier, I actually like the way it was framed in the slide deck here on that one. That might be a modification to the draft language on condition 6, which in draft.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think maybe mechanically the way we can think about it, at least in terms of how I framed it before, I should modify it a little bit. I think that what it might end up being is that for some of these other ones that are difficult to say right now, whether it's going to work or not, that we push those off to possible consideration when this is reviewed again. The benefit, though, at least, is that Landmarks hears what some of those possibilities are that the commission's thinking, as opposed to coming back in X number of months saying, I had no idea you were possibly thinking of those other things. Because without any additional information that would be helpful to have, my inclination would be to try to restrict the music earlier than 8:30. But recognizing that that could have an impact, because it's I don't want to be arbitrary and kind of
I
thinking
see.
about it. So
And there may be a financial impact to that because we heard that that was a problem.
Exactly.
I don't want to forget one thing that the sound engineer recommended was the loudspeaker on the stone wall pointed perpendicular to the road. I think we should just build that in. One speaker pointed perpendicular to the road, because that's just becomes a practice.
And I think that would be in condition 6
Exactly.
as well.
Yeah, that's part of
It
6.
wasn't clear to me if that was the one speaker gave you the best readings of the sound per the DJ, or if that, so like, in other words, do we need to be that prescriptive, as Commissioner Sy likes to often say? Or are we just requiring?
It's under
the
mitigation
decibel?
though. This was a recommended mitigation measure. So I read this as a recommended measure to mitigate noise.
To one speaker, but I guess what I'm saying is,
Along with the decibel levels limit.
I think your point is that too restrictive?
yeah, is it, I mean,
So-
if somebody shows up with 2 4-inch speakers,
Yeah.
is that equivalent to
So-
1 6-inch
Oh,
speaker?
we didn't hear from the applicant on that. I had heard the applicant kind of embrace that idea. They talked about, we realized that this is actually a good way to do it. And so I didn't hear an objection to this particular mitigation.
I will say for my part, in this particular case, the reason why I'm persuaded that maybe some more granularity is helpful is because the CUP prohibited it entirely in 1997. So for whatever reason, and I'm not assigning any bad faith on the Landmarks part, the reality is it wasn't complied with in very specific terms. And so I think that if we're going to allow it, and I am inclined to allow it, that we be very specific as much as we can, recognizing that when we review it again,
Right.
it might need some tweaking if it's still not working.
There's nothing that precludes Landmarks from coming back to us in June saying, that mitigation requirement, it's not really working.
That's right.
But I think, I think, given that it was a mitigation recommended by the Landmarks consultant, and I haven't heard any objection to it, I'd be inclined to put it
I
in.
feel like the 1 speaker versus 2 is arbitrary because, as Commissioner Woodward pointed out, what if you're a DJ that has smaller speakers and you don't have one large speaker? I mean, as long as they're pointed toward Tiburon
But has
Boulevard.
Landmarks has that, I haven't heard that as a problematic.
The main thing was
from
just
the
trying to
perspective of
set if you've got the decibel level as the limiter,
Yeah.
does it matter how it gets there? And to some extent, again, if somebody wants to come with their mariachi band, I wouldn't mind limiting the decibels for the mariachi band as well.
Right.
Well,
And-
but I'm looking at the sound study. It says these do not change the spirit of the agreement, but provide specificity and should actually be more straightforward to enforce. So so our sound engineer, our sound expert is saying this is a way to actually it's more enforceable as a mitigation measure.
I agree.
Well, the Landmark
Oh my God,
Society
this is the first time in a while that it's been two against two.
The Landmark Society is unusual in that they have a decibel reader and they have someone checking. That's not something you do, right? You said that. Oh, you will. They're going to. So it won't matter how many speakers there are if they have
Is it-
the reader there.
Is it
This is
possible
not the
to ask
one.
the applicant if the applicant has a, a strong opinion on this?
We can't register the comments from the
This is
public.
not one that I think we need to die on, so I
No.
will I'll throw my vote over to the, since it's in the applicant's, experts, witnesses testimony. Yeah.
But we will take feedback in a couple of months if that's not, is becoming problematic for guests, you know, or for.
Okay, so what needs to be in there now? We definitely agree we should put in what's already being complied by out of the good neighborliness of the Landmark Society, what they have up here. Not the specific one-offs there at the bottom, but the ending the music at 8:30.
Why
So
don't-
we agree we should put that.
Yeah, that will
in.
put.
I think all of them are fine, frankly, and I think they're all great, except for the second to last one, which is more of an accommodation to mollify someone, which, by the way, I think is very neighborly that y'all did it. I just don't think it needs to be a requirement.
This parking.
That
And
it's
also, I
second
think
to
the
yeah.
consultant's already been hired and recommended changes now.
Yeah, I don't. know
Yes,
that we-
that's true.
I don't know that we want to require them to be doing hedge work.
No,
And then
yeah.
Same thing with the summer camp program.
Yeah.
Oh,
'cause
fair,
that's
that's
where-
fair. That's
that's
fair.
why-
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
I think those first four are the ones that are really specific
That's
to
fair.
the issues before.
That's true. That is true.
There's one more that came up a lot in the letters that I don't see up here, and that's the frequency of the events. And if we could go back to the schedule of what's already on the docket for 2025. I mean, I know that we talk about it, or it was presented as being a very small percentage of the overall hours of the day that the Landmark Society could be open, and that it is open. But if you, obviously, we've just gone through a very wet winter, you know, if your nice sunny season is basically that kind of May through October timeframe, and there's an event every single weekend, you're going to feel pretty impacted. And we heard that a lot from the neighbors who have to live through it. And I do think, like, if I think back to like the Belvedere Community Center, we'll do events, outdoor amplified music. I'm sure they're getting permits for it. It's Belvedere, who knows? But you know, they set up dates. It's 4 days a year, and everybody knows the date, and you can plan around it. And so if you're going to have your birthday party, you just know either you're throwing in with it or you're going to do it the day before, or the day after. And I think that the notification system here will work much better. But unless we put in kind of requirements about the notification, or we get more prescriptive and we say it's only, you know, the first and third Saturdays of the summer months. But I think we need to think about that because of what we heard from the neighbors.
I think, well, that's what that's for discussion and when we come back in a few months, but actually we might be able to be more specific because currently I think that Landmarks is limiting this to 18 events per year. Or 20, I'm sorry. 20. It said I'm looking at correspondence that people sent in. Okay, so
They had
20 per
18.
year, and there is a proposal on the table by one of the neighbors that be brought down to 14 total weddings per year. So I think for consideration between now and when we come back in June is 20 down to 14 feasible? Is something in between feasible? And then we discuss that and just be real specific. We have our parameters. We've got 20 at the high end and 14 at the low end. And let's review what that looks like with more information and more analysis.
Yeah, and I will tell you, that is what I had in mind in terms of where I'm at on the issue of frequency. But for me, what I want to make sure of is that the applicant has some sense of where our heads are at as
Mhm.
far as some of those changes without forcing the changes right now and not giving them the opportunity to think about it, mull it over,
The impact of that.
the impact of it.
How do we write this in such that if we're asking them to come back in,
We put a
8 weeks,
review period in the conditional use permit.
okay, so we ask them to come back in 8 weeks, but we potentially need to change things that would impact weddings that are already scheduled. And since
So-
we can't
yeah.
grandfather in,
So, well, my own view here is that I do not think we should try to monkey with the current schedule. And I'll give you my reason. It's not because this year doesn't matter anymore. This year matters as much as last year to the neighbors and the year next. Of course it matters. Trying to change things right now, putting aside why we're here, opens a Pandora's box I don't think we want to participate in opening. They're, you know, they sign, the Landmarks folks, look, we're not doing the work for them, but I understand at least the reality that there are contracts that have been signed and there are consequences if there are changes that happen, both to obviously the folks who would have to cancel their contractual obligations. That's complicated if we suddenly say half of those are gone. I just don't think we should be getting into the mix on that. It doesn't mean there's not pain in 2025 that folks would have to suffer that we may or may not ultimately think should be compressed.
I think we're all in agreement. I mean, just to cut
Okay.
to the chase,
Yeah.
we've talked about this a few times. We're in agreement. What we can build in here are these specific, why don't we build in the specific tweaks that are already happening that
Yes,
can
on that
apply to the
agree.
current list of weddings?
I agree
Build
with
in
that.
the
I-
review period, build in the review period to come back. And I think we're stating on the record what we're
Yes.
asking the applicant to
I-
come back to us
I'm
on.
totally in agreement on that. I don't know that I was trying to address
Yeah.
specifically.
And I don't think either of you are getting to the point. My point is, if there is a review period that sits in the middle of the wedding season, if I'm one of the people with the deposit down, I don't have 100% confidence.
But we're not changing the schedule. This would be for the next season.
Yeah.
For new contracts that are being
Yeah, we're not
negotiated.
suggesting we change in the
Can I-
middle of this season.
Can I just quickly clarify? Sorry, and I might have missed that. Are we suggesting an approval with conditions or a continuance of, hey, okay, so I just wanted to, so you're looking for an approval, and I understand everyone, and, as to sort of this season, my understanding is keeping everything, as it is, and you could just simply direct staff not
So
to
we're looking
enforce.
for,
that
an
condition with-
approval with conditions. And one of those conditions is to come back
Within 8 weeks or.
in June, sometime in June. We want to be after these April, May weddings.
Mhm.
So we have some data
Mhm.
and we can hear for ourselves. And so that's just going to be a condition of the approval. But we recognize this is something that could come back to us a couple times. I mean, I think what we're hearing is we need to monitor
And
that.
I still don't understand. If they come back in 8 weeks and we've had 5 weddings and the neighbors are like, every single one sucked. It was super loud. It was crazy. This has got to stop.
Well, so I hear what you're saying on the frequency issue,
but if
because
they-
one of
if
the
they
things we're
come back-
asking to talk about is frequency. There might be other tweaks that can be integrated.
But if
in
they
eight-
come back in 8 weeks, I feel like the person who has a wedding in 9th week doesn't have 100% certainty that they won't lose that, because we could change our mind.
Yeah, so
If the review period
Yep,
is
so-
in the middle of the wedding season.
I
so-
see what you're saying.
I don't see how else we write it into there.
So it is possible that if this commission, by the way, this commission could always do that. This commission could decide that it's going to reevaluate. So there's nothing that stops the commission from doing that. I'm just trying to put on the record my own view of this, which is the review that I'm contemplating would be for specifically on the issue of frequency, and maybe other issues, but frequency in particular would be applicable for 2026. That's just
Right.
my view,
Yeah.
because I don't
Right.
believe it makes sense to monkey with 2025.
That was my,
If
that was
that's
my
the
view too.
case-
Yeah.
Then why wouldn't we have the conditional use permit be approved with the review period being in 6 months?
Well, it is a bit arbitrary.
So
think-
the 6
I
months
think
is after
part
the
of it
wedding
is
season.
also just
So
recognizing, there was another issue that Commissioner Slide brought up was the timing of the amplification. Like, is the amplification only allowed during certain times? There are smaller tweaks we can make. I
But-
think part of it is also good faith efforts on our part.
But I think even
to
those
look at
tweaks,
the-
we heard from wedding participants that even that could be detrimental. So if our tweak was, hey, let's just stop amplified music at 7:30, now somebody's wedding plans have been changed dramatic. What I'm trying to get to is, if we want to have confidence for the people who some of whom are in this
Yeah.
room, are going to have weddings, some of which are going to be after May and this season that are already
I'm
booked.
not opposed to a later review period, just, I mean, a
we-
later. I wanted to give the people opportunity to come back to us, but
Presumably, we could direct them to speak with staff in that period,
Yeah.
shorter period of time. If staff were so alerted that this is a major problem, then we could
I see
pull
what
the
you're, I see what
review
you're
period
saying about
forward if it was.
deliberating on the frequency issue if we're not going to change it until 2026. I do appreciate that. And then the concern that might cause, or the sense of
I'm trying to give people
uncertainty.
confidence
Yeah.
that they're going to go one way or the other.
No,
Well, we
it's a-
could
it's a
build
val-
in.
It's a good point.
We could build into the resolution that we're not going to change the criteria for this summer into fall. We could build that in there and still, I actually still think that we should meet earlier because the Art and Garden Center, the Landmark Society is going to need some direction earlier rather than later. People don't plan weddings 1 month before. They're going to need to know what's
Right.
happening next year.
Yeah, that's.
So I think
Yeah,
that we
boy.
should come back sooner, even if we commit to not changing what's already on this
Right,
year's
right.
calendar.
I think that, I mean, I don't see us having a whole, I think that's a great, does that address your concern at all? If we
commit to not
commit to not
changing
changing,
what
because
we
that
just
does give
saw.
certainty.
That feels like, then why are we meeting?
The
But-
scheduling going forward. People
So
people
we've
schedule
created-
weddings
Okay.
years in advance.
Right, but we've created a conditional use permit. I mean, look, the last conditional use permit persisted for 27 years, 28 years now. So, we're creating a conditional use permit, and then we're going to revisit it in 8 weeks, but we're going to commit to not change it because that would be detrimental to all the weddings that are already scheduled, of which they could schedule more in that.
We can ask them not to.
But we could set forth, here's our thinking for the 26 and beyond, and integrate that, the use permit, and then they know how to plan.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I mean, at the
It
end
can
of the
happen
day,
concurrently.
I do think it's.
It would have to be clear that it's not applicable to 2025.
Yeah.
We can set those conditions, just not make them applicable to, immediately.
Yeah, thanks for raising it because we want to make sure it's really
yeah, it was a
clear.
good point.
Yeah.
About where that can be
But I think we can do
ambiguous.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I think
Ambiguity. it's,
definitely that's an appreciated point because if we made that unclear, there'd still be people worried about whether their wedding's going to occur.
There's a lot that,
and
Clearly, I'm the
September.
one non-lawyer on the panel.
and yet you got right to the heart of the ambiguity.
I'll turn it back over.
Did,
well, we can integrate that.
I just want to add as well, just one small thing.
yeah.
It's a legally complex area to add conditions that have like an end date in CUPs. So just sort of as to that, issue of conditioning that we're sort of locked in for the season, I think you can just, direct staff to not enforce, you can.
No, but I
you
don't
could-
think, but I don't think that we would be doing that.
Okay, I thought I heard it. I'm sorry.
No,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, if
Yeah.
that is functionally what we're doing, we should talk about it, but I don't think that's what we had in mind.
Okay, great.
That it would be any condition that terminates on.
Exactly.
That,
So that's what I want to avoid, or anything that says, okay.
So
As
instead,
long
we
as we're-
direct staff to not enforce while it's still ongoing.
Well, you
I don't
could, I
know,
mean,
as a
that's one of
lawyer,
the
I don't know if I
suggestions.
like that as a lawyer at
Yeah.
all, because that can lead to lawsuits.
Why don't we start doing some wordsmithing? And actually, I was going to invite Commissioner Sy, who's an excellent wordsmith, looking at section 6, because you had proposed pulling in the music end times. And there was there were two things that you were going to integrate. And the location of the speaker, integrating those into section 6 to address those two. So let's see how we would do that, what we would recommend. Okay, it could come right after amplified music shall be permitted, amplified music shall not exceed when measured. Amplified music shall stop. We move the hard stop at 8:30 p.m.
well, I think what we may want to do, one way we could do it is by
Which
putting.
led to the cancel. Oh, yes.
Well, what we could do is put into that sentence the specific time period when amplified music is allowed.
from blank to 8:30.
Right.
Yeah.
That was one of the reasons I was asking a couple of the questions
Yeah.
of how it actually, how it actually works when the
I
rubber
thought,
hits the road.
I thought you were asking Landmarks to come back to us and talk to us about what's feasible there, that.
Well, in terms of what could change, I think right now, what we're talking about, well, and we could kind of,
We could tinker that further.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable for now with these events that are already scheduled to have those, that music last until 8:30. I'm
8:30.
open and I'm frankly open to it being earlier than 8:30, but I can live with it being 8:30.
Well, I think there's an expectation. I think that's going to really impact the
That's
current.
and
the
that's
current
my-
contracts.
exactly.
Yeah. So
That's-
we're not going to tinker. So I'm just wanting, I think the proposal I made was we just add in the current restrictions, just add them in so that they're codified.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So so at the end of section 6, we would say amplified music shall stop at 8:30 PM.
Yeah, I think it would read the current sentence. Dina, this is for you. It would read the current sentence and then it would say during but only during the hours of X to Y. Right? So we would say held on the subject property, comma, but only during the hours of X to Y.
Are you going to tell us X to Y?
That's.
Or do you want me just to guess?
trying to
And
do the
it's an
easy part.
algebra guess for me. I'm not inviting you to my wedding, so please.
Oh, here, we've got the timing
Do we
already.
do we have to do that right now, or we can say in no event shall amplified music continue past 8:30 PM? And just address
yes,
that for tonight.
Yes, that would work. I
Okay,
think.
in no event shall amplified music continue past 8:30 PM.
But do we run into the issue if amplified music starts at 6 a.m., 7 a.m., church services?
I just
never
don't,
have.
I think that's not a problem that's going to happen between
well,
now.
Yeah.
They technically haven't been allowed to have amplified music before.
We're coming back we're
Yeah,
coming back
we
to
can fix
look
it
at
later.
that specific issue because we're asking them to tell us, is there a start time that makes sense to you?
Okay.
We have to,
Commissioner Woodward, there
No.
is an hour of operation on the site, so they wouldn't be able to come in at 2 a.m. and do that. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we all- are we-
Certainly, yeah.
We could tailor it later.
a mass resignation from the commission. Y'all have to feel
Yeah.
worried.
No,
Be here in
I-
6 months.
At the end of the day, Commissioner Woodward is technically right? If you don't put that specific restriction, that can happen. The reality is
We're
that I
coming back
have a
to
feeling that the
specifically
landmarks
address that.
knows that if that happens, it's going to have a bigger problem.
And-
That's why I'm not concerned about it.
and the reality, Commissioner Sai, is it says during the event, and since the events can't take
Fair enough.
place at that period of time,
Yeah,
I
that's
think
true.
we've secured those boundaries of operation.
That's fair. I think that's a fair point.
And then, sorry, we also say amplified music, but they have the right to use amplified. And some of the comments from the public were about speeches and
Yeah.
microphones and talking. So are we going to try and pick that up as well?
Well, that's a good question because there are actually specific recommendations here that don't show up in 6. So 6 just talks about they shall not exceed 60 decibels. Well, actually, that's not true. They've brought all of it down to 60 decibels. So the sound study had recommended dancing's is 73, speech is at 70, but it's all brought down to 60 across the board. So
At the
yeah.
border.
So
of
I
the
think that
property.
gets to the mitigation that was recommended for speech, specifically to speech.
Only if it's actually written that way into the conditional use permit.
It actually says it.
'Cause-
Other amplification or public
Uh,
address systems for lectures or other speech activities shall be limited to a single microphone with amplified noise that is kept to minimal levels. So we could just say below
Well, I
the
was-
60 dB.
I think that was
Exactly.
in the original CUP. That
So we could say that it
Yeah.
will not exceed
Exactly,
60
dB. So
dBs.
just clarify that that too is subject to the 60 dB limit.
And is it also subject to time limits? Because the original CUP has different time limits for the amplified speech than the amplified music.
looking
Again,
at-
trying to make it
Yeah, let's
consistent
go back to
across the
original.
board.
Yeah, yeah. Where are the time limits in the original?
Well, your original time of operations until 10 o'clock each night, 11
Sorry,
o'clock
I'm
on.
still-
Oh, we're
Friday,
gonna, I think
Saturdays.
we're gonna address that when we address the hours of,
I think to make it
Specifically.
across the board, what we could do is add a sentence that would be at the end of 6 that would say amplification for this condition, so that's condition 6, shall not shall not exceed past 8:30.
Continue beyond,
Or
yeah,
continue-
continue beyond 8:30 PM. And that applies to
Shall
the
not
whole-
exceed
Or
60.
a more generic
decibels.
amplification as opposed to amplified music or
Yeah.
speeches or anything, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then we could include in that same sentence, Dina, the issue of shall not exceed 60 decibels.
At the property line. It's not 60 at the speaker,
Oh,
it's
when
60 at the
measured-
property line.
Yeah,
measured at
when
the property
measured
line.
to any property.
Yes, yes, that's a good point.
I've been getting lawyered a lot by my teens, so I'm
Schooling us.
I'm trying to think, what would he do?
Yeah.
Adopting you.
Do you mind bringing that slide up with the other, the three other points? Because we were just going to add those, the notification. Did you had an idea about notification? You had said something.
Oh,
about
well,
frame
yeah, it's probably, it's not going to be wildly popular, but instead of notification, if you actually had set dates, because one of the issues was, the frequency of events happening, every, and you see it on the dates that are reserved up there. It's like every Saturday for 3 months. And so, if instead there were specific dates already set forth, you don't even have to worry about notification because effectively, that there's going to be events.
If the
first, the
schedule were
third,
provided.
right.
I noticed that the schedule is provided to 2 folks, but is there the
This was
schedule?
broader. This is like you actually set a schedule that the first and third month of, from April
I see
through
what you're
October
saying.
would be permitted for these types of events. So again, it's not going to be wildly popular. So I would leave that for let's see what they come back with in 2 months
Yeah.
in terms of the potential for compromises. But I do think, like, you can see how many events are already booked and how close they are in duration, that there's going to be still some consternation about that. And so notification, I think, is great. Everyone should subscribe to an email or newsletter or whatever that they can get posted on a regular basis. And we can give them as much notice in advance as possible, because if somebody's trying to plan their 50th birthday in their backyard and now all of a sudden a wedding gets scheduled on that date, you've got conflicts. But again, I think ultimately the best solution will be some sort of a midpoint
Right.
where dates are defined
Yeah,
1, 2, 3
yeah.
weeks a
Oh,
month.
that's good to daylight that. I think you're thinking on that now.
Yeah.
I think there is a notification provision in here somewhere already. It's like within a certain distance of I remember reading that. Oh, where did I see that? Maybe it's in the resolution? No?
I don't remember that.
Man, I thought I saw that. I guess not.
I don't think we generally do that, but
I don't think there
No,
was one.
The only notification requirement we have is for the actual CUP hearing itself. So when it's a 300-foot radius from the subject property. in
Yeah,
advance
no,
of
that I'm
hearings.
familiar with. Somewhere in here, there's something about that, but maybe it was just a proposal by someone and I just misremembered it.
All the
I
letters.
think it was something that the Arts and Garden Center is doing. They're notifying
Oh, that's
people.
what it was.
So I think
what it
that's why
was.
you're seeing that.
Okay,
but We
so
don't have
let's
any
go back to
requirement. for that.
that. Where was
Do
that?
we want to add that to the resolution or wait? What do you think? I don't know that we've drafted one of those.
There was some good
I mean-
language somewhere. I can't find it.
I think once you know your frequency and where the dates are.
Okay, I'm
then-
okay.
I mean, you wouldn't know the dates necessarily. If they're allowed to do it 2 weeks out of the month, let's say, I'm just throwing out numbers. Then we don't know whether it's the first or the third, or are you going to be that specific? We don't know yet what you're going to talk about when you look at.
Yeah, and it's a
frequency.
little hard to, I mean, the concept is, I was hearing from people is there are a couple of people who are directly impacted who aren't notified. And so just expanding the notification of
Yes.
that. And the applicant said that's easy to do. So, we can maybe come up with something in the context of thinking through the frequency later. I think I would recommend, informally that's just a part of the notification process is just reaching out to the folks who are, we know are impacted. And I think they're on notice.
You don't think we can write that into the conditional use?
That's what I
permit?
was
I think we
asking.
could. I think we could say that notification is required for every house on Gilmartin, Stony Hill,
Stony Hill.
up to a certain point on Gilmartin.
Well,
property.
that's where okay. I had heard from Dina that it might make sense to do that in the context of talking about frequency, but
You could effectively say there must be some sort of a notification service that anybody can subscribe to make it so they notify them once to let everyone know that this is the way that you go and you come here and sign up on the website or email or something that gets pushed out to them. Just because if somebody moves, again, putting the onus on the neighbors in the sense of signing up, putting the onus on the landmark in the sense of actually doing it in a timely manner or on a regular basis or cadence or something.
So maybe, since we don't know what the timing should be, maybe we should push that to the next meeting, because we don't know what the notification timing should be. So,
I mean,
That was the, that was. the
yeah,
objective.
so I think
Or
Dina's
you-
recommending we push that.
I just, I also think it's going to be a difficult one. They're going to have to, I think what I would suggest, something what Commissioner Woodward's saying, which is it's on their website. You can subscribe to the mailing list and you get all the events. They probably push out lots of advertisement and lots of marketing. And so that could be part of it too, that you get wedding on May 10th, from X to Y. So they could be doing that. And I think they do a lot of notification of the
here it is.
adjacent neighbors, not the ones up Gilmartin or Stony Hill.
Here it is right here. That's the language I had remembered.
So that's,
We
yeah.
provide our two nearest neighbors with full schedule. In addition, they and two others are notified before the event. We don't know, it's email. I heard that it's just an email that gets sent out.
Which is probably a better way, because when we send out notices and people move, then they say they didn't get it, but it's to that assessor parcel number. So this might be better. People keep their email addresses more than they keep their regular addresses, it seems.
I think that I do think it's going to be an easier thing to address when we come back, because we could also hear from the applicant as to what's a platform that could work, or how would they structure that in a way that works with their systems. And I don't have too many concerns that I think there's an organized set of neighbors that is organized around this meeting. I think they know, I'm not so worried about the notice in the next few months. I do think we should have a notice requirement in here once we have a schedule and feedback from the applicant as to what's workable or what's preferable, maybe even preferable even versus workable.
Okay, so the only thing
Because
left,
I am not the tech expert, unless you have a tech. You're the tech guy.
I think, we heard the applicant say it's not that difficult.
Oh, it's an email.
And so, and there's language required for this meeting, our planning commission meeting to happen, that people have to be noticed. We could sort of lift the language of when meetings are required, how do you write that in? Again, I think it's something that we heard neighbors, and I want to be thoughtful because, we've obviously gone to a point where we've effectively said, hey, we've heard you, but for 2025, we're still going to let everything go through with very minor tweaks, right? So trying to be thoughtful about, we've heard you, and right, we're gonna do a few of these things. So again, notification feels like one of those ones. If I know that there's a wedding coming up in 2 weeks, I can plan accordingly. It's Saturday, I'm gonna have my event on Sunday. That will allow a lot more enjoyment for everyone. So I know it may be tedious to write that out. Or
we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So there are two things left from my mental checklist. One being a little more complicated, that Commissioner Tsai and I are wondering about, just asking the staff not to enforce is, I don't think that's advisable either. I think it's better to have something in writing that says we're allowing these events that are already scheduled. And then the last point that we haven't talked about that we could put in this resolution now, I think, but I want to hear from everyone, is the on-site monitoring of sound, because they've already volunteered, they're buying a monitor. Should
Yeah,
we
I
put that
agree.
in there now?
Yeah, I think so. They volunteered that. And also we have these 2 points as well about when guests are off the property and vendors and the deliveries.
And I actually I continue to not think that the first issue you raised is going to be that complicated. I don't think we need to put in language that says the 2025 events are grandfathered. I admit that was the original word I used. Because by granting a CUP,
Right.
we're by
applies,
definition
apply.
saying that what exists is allowed.
Yeah.
My only point was, and I just wanted to make it clear for the benefit of landmarks, is to know that my inclination is to try to reduce the number of events, but not for 2025. And that's the reason why, for me, it's for them to look to 2026 to, for themselves, imagine and come back to us and say, what world would a world look like in 2026 in which we have less events? I want to hear that. I have ideas in my head, but I want to presuppose what the answer is. And it's there that I think we potentially, if the commission were to do it, would potentially then modify that CUP again, both as to frequency, as to hours, maybe it's decibels, any of those things.
Okay, so the only other thing we need to draft is the on-site monitoring clause.
And we need to pull in, we have not yet pulled in, all it is adding after 18 even, something that says, or, you know.
Oh, the hours?
Guests must be off, wedding guests must be off the property by 9 PM and vendors by 10 PM. That's what they're already doing. And so we're just adding this in as a provision here in our conditions. And then the next one would be rental deliveries and pickups occur only on Fridays and Mondays. And that's another provision.
I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah,
They're doing that. So we're not imposing that. We're just adopting it and codifying it.
Okay, so maybe the on-site sound monitoring should go in paragraph 6 where we already talked about the decibel levels. So we need to add a sentence there. And then we'll add number 19 or 18 with the
I think
timing.
they've noted that.
But we need to draft the language for the monitoring, I think.
We could do that, yes, where you'd say on-site monitoring shall take place at the perimeter or the boundary along the adjacent neighbors, or, because you'd probably, I mean, you could take it along Tiburon, but I think most of the issue is the
Yeah.
sides and up towards the hill. So maybe they can work with a monitoring plan on where they're going to site that, where they're going to sit with the monitor during the events. This is not just one location. You're not just going to stand in the middle of a thing.
So
Yeah, it has to be on the boundaries.
Right.
So that's actually an example where I think we don't need to be too granular, both because we're not going to do it right. And also because that's something, sorry, Dina, more appropriate for the applicant to talk with planning about.
Right, to give me a monitoring plan.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
So we could say an on-site monitoring plan shall be provided to Community Development Department for acceptance and approval.
Perfect. So we'll
Okay.
add that
Yeah.
to the paragraph 6 we already tinkered with. Okay, great. So the only one left
That's it.
then is the one with the hours in it and the deliveries and pickups on
I
Friday.
think they
and Monday.
noted, I think we
noted that.
we noted those. Yeah, they've noted those.
It's okay. You have the language in a sufficient, you
So
know how
let's,
to put it
let's
together.
just make sure.
Yeah, that's why I'm
Let's
asking.
just make sure. I may not be able to verbatim it because I was scribbling very quickly, but, and I'm sure Sam has some stuff too, but first we wanted to talk about amplification, that it shall not continue beyond 8:30 PM and shall not be above the 60 decibels at the property line.
And that's general amplification, not saying music or speaking, it's just
Right.
amplification.
General amplification, so we're not saying anything more than that. That we have a monitoring plan that is submitted to staff in order for review and approval. That all guests shall leave the venue by 9 and vendors by 10. And there was one more.
The rental deliveries and
Oh,
pickups.
that's the rental. Oh, yeah. All rental deliveries and pickups shall occur on Friday and Mondays only.
Only.
I think we caught everything.
And so we're not going to address frequency.
Oh, and then the review, and then adding in a.
Oh, and adding
yeah.
a
Can I ask
period.
one question before we get to the review? And it was discussed and I started to kind of write it down, but I wasn't sure if it was something you wanted added as a condition. Did we want to put language that said something like prior to the start of each event season, Landmarks shall notify all parties who subscribe to their mailing
I think
list?
we-
Or are we going to wait on that?
We're gonna
Wait on the
wait
notification.
till we know the frequency and
Right.
hear further from what's
What works,
practicable.
what's
Yeah.
practical.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
And
then-
just, so we just need to add a provision to come back for review. I think we landed back on the June
So
date.
in June or July?
That's not
So-
where we ended up.
So I think,
I won't be here.
June or July?
I think,
June or July,
vacation.
how does it look from a staffing, from a calendaring perspective?
I
for you?
mean, I don't know that far out, but what I'm thinking also is that from the perspective of the arts and garden people, we probably want to do it sooner than later because they're probably setting up their calendar already for 2026. Because I did notice that somebody's already getting married in May of next year. So, you know, people do plan a year plus ahead.
I was thinking June. That's four weddings in.
Yeah, I mean,
Where are we? Oh, it's April now.
we're April now, so we may want to
March-
consider
March
either
now.
July or, you know, June or July, yeah.
June or
With-
July.
I think that, because I'm sure they're scheduling already for next year.
June gives us sufficient data. I mean, we've got a number of weddings. They'll have time to think about the impact. I mean, we're just asking to look at 20 weddings a year versus 14, and then how best to notify
Yeah,
and if there's some parameters around the timing of amplification.
right.
And, you know, there's so many things that we're implementing, that you're kind of implementing for the first time now that we'll be testing over the next 4 weddings. So we'll see where's the sweet spot, can we find a sweet spot?
I
we
think
could-
May 28th is one of our next planning commission. And then after that, 2 weeks after that, right? So June, whatever that is, let's see,
That's-
June 11th.
11th.
June 11th. I think it's more realistic to think about June 11th.
Yeah, let's do June
Yeah,
11th.
well, and we know that we sometimes have scheduling problems amongst ourselves, so
Yeah.
let's aim for June
June
11th.
11th, yeah.
Okay.
I don't think
I do believe it's.
that's too far ahead. in my
Okay, so I think
calendar.
we're probably ready for a motion
Oh,
on
God.
on the changes that we've already agreed upon. Would you like us to try to restate at least loosely what the categories of the changes were?
That would be great
in
as
order
part of
to-
the motion.
okay.
would be
Does anyone want to
fabulous.
volunteer to do that?
Gosh.
I can try. I think I'm going to need support from my co-commissioners. Okay, so the motion being to approve the resolution with changes to paragraph 6 that we delineated that are generally about sound restrictions on amplified sound and sound measurement.
Just note paragraph 6 of Exhibit B. to
Paragraph
the
6, oh yeah,
resolution.
it's Exhibit B, the conditions of approval that is attached to the resolution. Also with an additional paragraph added to the end, which I don't know which number it will turn out.
I think
be.
it was 8.
I have 20 here, so 20 paragraphs. So
it'll
whichever
be
number
19 to
you'd like it to
21.
be.
19,
Yeah.
adding paragraphs 19 to capture the time by which guests must
Mhm,
leave and
mhm.
vendors and guests. 20 to capture delivery and pickup
Right.
times.
Okay, so
or
paragraph
dates.
19 to capture the timing of guests departing, and paragraph 20 to capture the deliveries and pickups, the times allowed.
Can we change?
And I'm missing
19.
one. There's another one.
The review
Rental.
period.
The
and
review,
review.
and a paragraph to embed the review period with the intention to come back
June 11th.
on or approximately on June 11th.
Yes.
Did you get the
Is that everything?
positioning of the speaker under the amplified? We had also talked
We're
about.
just,
We
we're just
decided
using,
to wait,
we
didn't we?
decided to wait on that so we can figure out where it would best be.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think we decided to wait on more things than not, and so that's
Oh.
only 3 major categories of changes. Is that all of them?
On-
Anyone? think of
on-
another?
Sorry, yeah, I think we said on 19 or 20 was going to be the hours, but we already have hours of operations at 18. And so are we just specifying hours of
You're-
hours of
You're
amplified
right.
amplification?
You're right. 18 becomes kind of a moot.
I think 18 has to be changed with respect to the 9
Change
o'clock close of people.
That's a great point. Yeah. We'll
Can I
revise
just-
18.
Can we be clear? So what are you doing with, is it being reevaluating on June 11? I mean, what is the sort of, is it just checking
It's a review.
compliance? Is it just
Yeah,
a
I
review?
think it's a review period and
Okay.
we've indicated what we'd like to hear, some of the issues we'd like to hear about, but there might be others.
Aren't you also going to consider frequency?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
when we come back, yeah.
But I mean, yes, I mean, I guess.
So it's not just a review in the sense.
I think council. How would this be properly noticed for the next meeting, perhaps?
Yeah, I just want to make sure, what are we doing at the next
Yeah,
meeting?
I think that it should be clear for purposes of noticing the meeting that
Mhm.
it may mean changes to the CUP.
Mhm. For an ongoing discussion of the
Review.
current CUP and a review of what has already been done. I mean, it's really open.
I'm just going to reiterate,
Well, maybe for
the minute, unless we can say that, unless we can specify that it will be for the conditional use permit in 2026, that anyone who has a wedding after the date of our meeting is not going to feel 100% confident that they're going to get to have the wedding that they planned.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned we should just put something in here that says any changes made in the review meeting, which is June or soon thereafter, would be effective after this wedding season. But I know that council doesn't love the
Is there any
language, but
recommendation by council? I mean, do you understand kind of what we're trying to get at here?
yeah.
Yeah, I do understand and it makes sense to me. I just wondered if, and I'm not comfortable with sort of just a condition that says, you can approve amplified sound until a certain date and then we can review. I would be more comfortable with a cleaner process like that. So you can say, amplified sound is approved with these conditions until the end of, this season or 2025. And then after that, there is a review period or sort of it comes back for review. I'm not sure it doesn't feel as clean. I worry, and I just haven't read it in a while, but there's a case that I'm thinking of that sort of, and I would have to research it, so I just don't have it off the top of my head, but that speaks to sort of conditions that terminate or conditions that, so I would feel more comfortable based on the little knowledge that I have right now to have it be a little more clean about, okay, we're approving amplified sound through October 2025 or, the November, whatever the season is. And then we're gonna, and that amplified sound is approved with the conditions that you've laid out here, which is 8:30, guests leaving by 9, delivery and pickup, all of that. So that is approved through November 2025. And then there's a review period. So I would be comfortable with a condition like that, but it sounds like you want to sort of have it, that you want the iterative process of checking in June and sort of seeing what's working, what's not, what are other ways we can.
It sounds to me we do want the iterative process, and I think there is some sense on the commission that we may be changing the frequency, but we don't want to change that now to impact the 2025 weddings, but we also don't want to wait until November, December of 2025, because that's going to mess up the scheduling for 2026. So we're trying to accommodate.
I think we could do both. I'm actually fine with that formulation
Yeah.
that would put it with a terminus date
Me too.
and still have
An interim review?
review.
Can we do that?
Well, I would say that we approve amplified music for a certain amount of time and then we review. That's how I would sort of
That's how
frame
she
it.
wants to do.
Yeah,
She
as
wants to
opposed
review
to
after.
Yeah,
We can't have an interim. I feel like
we probably can. It feels cleaner to me to approve a use, but as
Well,
long, yeah.
Worst case,
Yeah.
the reason I still think we can do that is because worst case scenario is that we approve it with the terminus date of X. We have call it June review period. And in that June review period, assuming we noticed it right, we could decide that whatever we want. But
she's saying but that's not what she's
Yeah.
recommending. She's recommending we have a terminus of November and a review post-November.
And I would recommend no termination. I would just say we're approving it, for a certain amount of time. Yeah. But if we can take a recess of like 5 minutes and I can try to get some clarity on how we want to move forward on this, because I understand that you want the iterative process. You also want to provide protection for this season of weddings, which makes total sense.
I'm okay with taking a 5-minute
5-minute
recess,
break, yeah.
assuming it's not
Yeah,
7
I
or
think we
10
could all
or
use
15
that.
minutes. But I will say, I really don't think there'd
Yeah.
be a problem with
Okay.
having the terminus date and then still having a review hearing. I mean,
Review, okay.
the planning commission could decide we're doing a review hearing once a week on this if we
Yeah.
wanted to. There's no restriction on it. But As long as we don't notice it,
Wrong.
as long as we don't notice it, I think that it's noticed as we're potentially going to be making changes, then I think it's fine. I happen to believe that as long as we're kind of giving, I really want to give the Art and Garden folks an opportunity to assess what we're talking about and come back to us so we can try to,
We have some
Yeah.
actual, yeah.
But I'm sorry, I thought I heard you
Take it.
say, notice it so that we wouldn't be making changes. But you.
for 2025.
We're going to take we'll take a
Yeah,
5-minute break
let's
so
take
she
a-
can do the research on what we can.
Let's take a
and can't do.
5-minute break. Do I pound the gavel for a break? 5 minutes from now. We'll say we'll come back at 9:50. Okay, if everyone could please be seated. We're going to reopen the
meeting.
Planning Commission meeting after our 6-minute recess. All right, council, let's see how good your
Yes.
research skills are.
Pressure.
So we can sort of, allow amplified music until, for example, whatever date you set. I would rather not use 2025 season because I think that's just too vague. So we could say, November,
November.
December, whatever, a specific date.
Okay.
We should be clear on the record that that does not run with the land. This specific, there is that once December 31st or whatever date you set, that condition doesn't run with the land. It's I know this was a quick research. So we have to be clear on the record about that. The other thing I would want clarity on is those conditions you've just set with 8:30, 9 p.m. and the delivery and pickup. What happens to those conditions once that, that condition that says you can have the 2025 amplified music? Like, what are those conditions also tied to that condition? I mean, it's just.
No, we put the section 6 has everything that relates to amplification. The other points don't relate to amplification. The delivery, that's just noise. That's just mitigating noise and activity. So it's really only the one provision that encompasses everything relating to
So we're allowing amplified noise moving forward 2025 or not, with those conditions, sort of what
through, that's provision 6.
Provision 6.
Number 6 of the condition number 6 is allowed through, I would say, as I understand it, the season ends in November, so through November 2025.
Condition 6.
I think they have a
Condition
wedding
6.
in November. There is one in November.
Through November. So let's say December 1st.
Through the end of
Through
November.
November. So December 1st. And so it's just that, so the other ones are just what's happening already. We're just embedding them into we're just recognizing that these are happening. These are conditions that they've imposed. Let's put them in here. They work. They're helpful.
Okay.
So it sounds like we can do that, but where do you fall on the review? Can we have an interim review?
We can have an interim review as an update if that's what I would. I know that you would want to be changing potentially, but maybe we do an update first and then go from there. I'm not. Can it? Can we set like a specific time? Because when you set a specific date, it sounds to me like a continued to a date certain, as opposed to it's unusual to have a come back for review on June 11 or sort of on or around June 11 in a CUP. So is there?
We just wanted an update after a certain number, after some weddings.
Right.
I'm not wedded to a date at all. I was thinking in approximately June, in 3 months, in 3 months.
Every CUP I've seen has a period of time. in
Right.
it.
Say 3 months.
Yeah, 3
Right.
months.
Yeah.
I'm
So you do a
okay with
3-month review.
Right. I'm
Update.
okay with I'm okay with a 3-month review update.
But update implies we can't change. We're not going to make
But we've
changes.
said, oh,
I would say, it would be an update. You receive the update and then, possibly decide if you want to make changes from there, and it might have to.
At that meeting, or we'd have to notice for a
No,
different
well,
meeting.
I mean, one of the things that's
I know it's
beneficial
the
about.
same thing that's happened with,
But one of the things that's beneficial about an update is we're talking about what's working, what's not working. We know this runs through November.
Mhm.
And after November, we can then continue it for December.
Mhm.
But we've had a conversation about what's working, what's not working.
Mhm.
That can factor into their planning
Mhm.
purposes that we'll deal with in December.
Okay.
So I think that update is informative because in the real world,
Mhm.
there are real contracts and there's a real timeline.
So it gives everyone who has a wedding through whatever the
Certainty.
fine, the certainty, but it's not going to give anyone that they book going forward that same level of certainty, although a high degree of, at least there's a conditional use permit, but it's going to end. So I still think they're going to be in a difficult situation. I guess they could come back with an update where it seems like it's all rosy. But again, if I'm on the other side of this and I know nothing can change at that meeting, I might not even show up to it. And then I show up in December when it's going to die and then have beef. So Just trying to think
I
through,
know.
because ultimately, the landmark has to also be thinking about 2026
Mhm.
and beyond. And beyond, yeah.
So the ideal solution for everyone here is
Do the
you
frequency
first, you
tonight.
want to essentially allow amplified music with conditions. Is that correct?
Mhm.
You want it to apply to 2025 onwards, or because I guess I'm just not mentally, and maybe it's just me, I'm not mentally squaring. We're like going to allow 2025 to go through, but we want to have this iterative process for 2026 onwards, but also provide certainty. So I just want, and I know I see Chair DeFever looking at me,
Yeah.
but please,
I think what we're saying is we're going to allow amplified music. That part
Right.
we're not trying to change. We
Okay.
just may alter the frequency and the
Okay.
duration,
okay.
right?
Those
Everyone's
are the
nodding.
things that
But
I think we don't feel we have enough information tonight to be able to arbitrarily impose conditions.
Mhm.
right.
And, yeah,
Does that help, council?
So it comes back for review June 11, and that we could just, can we
3
make, or
months.
yeah, or June, or 3 months, or, so can we, add the changes to, condition 6, which is great. And then can we just have it just or add a condition that's like 3 months review for this particular, I'm okay with that, just as a 3-month review.
yeah, I think we're okay with that, but I think
Great.
Commissioner Woodward in response expressed concerns around.
So is it a review or is it an
Certainty
update? So if it's a review, then again, I
They
think
could
that the
imply
people,
changes.
some of whom are in this room who have weddings July, August, September, don't have that degree of confidence that, this commission can change. We're not all permanent up here. We're already missing one of our members. Who knows what happens in June? So
Look, I think these are all fair. I also think that we're not going to find kind of that perfection you're thinking of, although I think the point you're making is very legitimate. I do think we can build in some language that says whether we use the word review or update, that doesn't matter to me, that the next hearing we do would be a review with any changes applicable to 2026.
I think what council's worried about is we're not allowed to limit ourselves in that way.
See, that part, I don't know why we can't do that. I mean, what is it that, there's nothing I can think of in the law that says that we could not do that, right? If we say in the CUP that this stuff is, that it's allowed right now, to me, what's important about an update review is that we receive more information from Landmark as to how things are going, consideration of the points that we've made. What I don't want to do, we could do it tonight, I just don't think it's personally a smart thing to do, is consider other changes, including frequency, with the absence of information. Then it becomes really arbitrary to me.
But then when you consider those frequency changes, you're trying to have them apply to 2026
They wouldn't even
onwards.
apply to this. yeah.
That's the tension that I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable with, and it's super quick research, and I just don't, what I can tell you is I'm not comfortable with it until I have had more time to do research, and maybe with more time to look into it. But it's pretty unusual to be like, we're gonna allow it until the end of this year, but we want to start exploring the conditions we're gonna impose next year. That doesn't feel clean.
So, I take your point, except that the law is often built like that, right? The legislature passes laws that don't take effect
course.
sometimes for years. So that part personally doesn't bother me, just because it's a function of how a lot of laws are built.
Unless there's
I
some
guess this is
specific-
and this is where it's a land use entitlement. A CUP does run with the land. And so this tension of, you can do this up until the end of the year, but we want to explore conditions for 2026. I would rather have everything be neat on on the same timeline. I'm just not, and again, I just don't have I have did very quick research, so it's not the most solid answer. But I've never encountered quite a situation like this.
So it's fair enough. I mean, it's
Yeah.
fair enough. I take all the points you're making. It's fair. And we want you to voice concerns with you. That's why you're here. I mean, maybe what it is then is I personally agree that it makes sense to receive more information from them about how things are going in the kind of interim period. Maybe it is then just having them come back for a report. So using that word intentionally, right? A
Right,
report that
a
they
report.
make, and we receive information about it. And then I think
There's no
and-
suggestion that there will be
Right.
changes then.
And what we could do even now is say, we're going to have a second hearing that is scheduled
Exactly.
on December 1st
That
or
was my
whatever.
point, is then we have an update, we don't come back to make any changes. We not, because they wouldn't be enforced, they wouldn't be applicable immediately anyway.
Right.
So we
I-
have an update in 3 months, and then at that update, we can say we'll have an update in
Yeah.
December.
And I mean, we could do that. We could set that now.
I think, and that's where kind of we had arrived at
Okay.
that a while ago, but
I think it's the certainty because they're going to start planning 2026 like probably
Right.
now or like soon.
I think there's a benefit from the update that we have in
Yes,
3 months. 'Cause
I agree.
They'll still get a window of the thinking,
And
It's
at
the
the-
best we can do. Like Commissioner Sai said, it's not gonna be perfect, but I think it's actually pretty good as far as a process goes.
Yeah.
So it would be, just to clarify, we would make these changes to condition 6, we receive a report in 3 months, we come back for a public hearing, to review to encompass possibly changes, if I'm gonna use that term, at the end of the year.
Yes.
Sometime in December.
Yes.
So that sounds right to me. The only thing that gets a little lost in that is the notification provision, but I'm comfortable, with that would be deferred then until December.
And that's language that Dina and her team can work on, I think, given kind of the discussion.
Yeah, but we can start crafting that, and I think Landmarks on, in good faith can just start notifying folks.
Okay, so
No,
The rest is not getting.
let them.
I don't think that's what's happening.
Are we,
Gotta explain to me.
So we need to explain what we're talking about.
can I ask?
I know, I'm sorry, it's just that tension between
no
trying
need
to
to
lock
apologize.
trying to lock a
Yeah.
land use entitlement in now, but like change it for 2026. That's just
Yeah,
strange for me. I haven't
It's-
encountered
It's
it.
very unusual. We're in an unusual situation.
Yeah,
We
it
want to
is.
provide some certainty, but we also don't
Right.
want to close the door on
Right.
what we're doing, but we also want to provide notice that we're not closing the door. We've never done this before.
Yeah.
This is trying to do like
I
three
haven't
things at
either.
once.
I
Samantha,
we've
did you have
got-
a concern? I saw you.
I think that's an elegant
I was just
solution
gonna
though.
try to roll.
And the
like,
elegant solution
way
would
back
be-
to confirm what we're doing, but I'll wait.
An update,
Okay.
an update in 3 months, so we'd
Right.
add a provision that's just we'll call it just an update in
Mhm.
3 months. And that's all we're doing right now.
Mhm.
And we anticipate that we'll be doing a
Well,
further update.
No, so what you're saying is
December.
we make the changes to condition 6 to, 8:30 PM, 9 PM.
Make all the changes.
All the
that we-
amplified sound, we're allowing amplified music.
Mhm.
That we're approving that use. We come back for a report in 3 months or sometime in that, see an update on those conditions and how they're working, and then come back for a revision of that condition and this conditional use permit, possibly at the end of the year.
One question is, are we explicitly saying in here that we're allowing this through to December 1st? No, okay.
I would be okay with just, because we're embedding the revision element as part of it.
Yeah. We just have to remember, the one thing that we just have to remember, will the staff memo for the update address some of the items that we're going to be updated on? I don't want to lose this, we'll have, and we only have action minutes now too. I mean, I guess we can watch ourselves before, but I don't want
Who
to
has
lose
3
some of
hours?
these threads,
Agreed. And I think we can direct staff tonight to make sure that the
Yeah.
next memo incorporates these specific points.
These issues, the issues that we've identified that we would like to be updated on.
So I'm going to restate again what we're doing. We're approving amplified music and amending condition 6 with the 8:30 PM music is done, guests leave by 9 PM. was there the pickup and delivery restricted to, or is that another condition?
Those are different, separate
Okay,
conditions.
that's what I
that-
Actually, the
that
timing was for
we
the paragraph 19.
Changed 18, actually, I think we
Oh,
realized.
it was 18.
Because 18 is kind
Wherever
of
it fits, we will
irrelevant.
let
We're
you
going to
determine
change that to, I think 18 says hours of operation.
18 hours of operation.
I didn't know, I actually don't know what that covers. I mean, the times that we have are kind of specific to weddings. So I wasn't sure about the hours of operation, if there are other things,
There are, I think.
things that we're not factoring in that maybe that is a relevant provision still, because there's other stuff going on there.
Maybe
We're
we should
just-
leave that one alone then.
Yeah, I'm
tonight.
inclined to leave that alone and add one that picks up what we've talked about, which is the guests
Amplified sound.
leave by 9. There's guests leave by 9, vendors by 10, and then another paragraph. So that was 19. Then 20 is pickups and deliveries are Fridays and Mondays only.
Yes.
Okay, so we are allowing amplified music and amending condition 6 for the hours, which is 8:30 PM for amplified music. We're adding a condition that guests leave at 9, adding another condition that vendors leave at 10, another condition for pickup and delivery on Fridays and Mondays.
Correct.
And then we're doing a update
In-
within 3 months.
Yeah.
And then we are reviewing the conditional use permit or specifically amplified music. So what are we reviewing
So
in
the
in
update,
December?
the issues,
In December.
So we're doing the update. That's just going to be, everyone's going to, we're going to get an update on what's happening. But then what is the review at the end of the year? Is it
can
just
we
to the
put
use
that in
permit?
here now and then a review in December? Can we do an update in 3 months and then a review
In an additional 6 months.
in an additional 6 months? Can
We
we?
can do an update in 3 months and a review in 6 months.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, yeah, or 6, no, yeah.
Or what would it
Fair,
be?
yeah,
I mean,
okay, yeah.
6 months,
Yeah,
it seems
June,
like
Yeah.
December is
December.
not.
No, but
6
we have to be
months?
careful that the review
6
is not
months
6 months
after.
from today.
Yeah,
It
do we
has to
6
be
months after the 3.
After the,
six months
after,
after,
okay, so,
yeah.
Right,
So
my
let's do
math
9
is not-
months. Let's
Okay.
do it, and then a
Great.
review in 9 months. Let's just keep
Okay.
it clean.
There
Update
you go.
6 month
Okay.
review in 9 months.
and I'm going to say that one more time. So it's a motion to approve the draft
The only, I have
resolution.
one little question was just about
Yes.
the speaker.
Oh, that's right.
Mr. Sy and I were like,
Perpendicular.
we kind of want to be prescriptive, and now that's going to wait a whole year,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fine. They're going to measure sound
and they're going to do it anyway.
Gonna measure
on
sound.
their own, so I think it's fine. Yeah. They're
I
very
am
diligent.
really grateful that you guys have powered through
Had-
this one with me.
We had a sound monitoring built into section, to
Yeah,
provision 6,
Into
yeah.
paragraph 6 that they'll
Yeah.
monitor the sound, and Dina wrote down the language
Okay,
for that.
okay.
So
Well, I
that
would
solve the
recommend that,
speaker.
yeah. You do what your consultant has recommended. Try that one speaker.
I-
You just won't build it into.
I'm just going to point out, since this is my lot tonight, by December,
Mhm.
they will be fully booked for next year. So without having any sense of frequency and having any sense to come back to this,
But they're gonna get a sense in 3 months.
Is the best
We're
way.
gonna communicate
point
to
is
them
just
what
hopefully-
how we feel about that.
okay, so
And that will become that is the minutes of, that gets captured in the minutes. So it might not be the same configuration in December, but we're gonna have the commission's thoughts. I don't think you can jettison,
you
if
you
it's.
can't. But again, they're going to be booking between now and the next time that we meet, which is, highly unlikely to actually be 3 months. Because it's going to be the middle of the summer. We all got to get together.
That's a really good
we have to
point,
have a
because I
cleanup.
do get nervous that we build in these reviews
Yeah,
and
I
they
agree.
don't happen. And I think we're starting to see that this is becoming a
Mm-hmm.
problem. And so, actually getting a calendar of what we've scheduled and I get what you're saying about some things don't come back if there's not, but knowing what is subject to review and what, is
We can
kind
work
of-
on that from the town's perspective of,
Having been on the commission for 9 years, we used to have reviews a lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
We just did. And they were pro forma and they worked really well. And it seemed to be just routine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
that's what we talked about early on. When Dina explained.
And
We're
that-
trying to
that
get
will
back on
be-
track, I think.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
trying.
Okay, so
So-
in order to wrap this up, I think we have a timeline. I think
Yep.
we have the
We
language.
have the motion.
We have a motion.
So there, I did make a motion on the table, but it wasn't, I did not add this final portion. And that was quite a while ago. I'm not sure if that's really hard for the person going through the video to pick up what I said about a half hour ago and then add to it, or should we start over?
I think let's get the motion. Yeah, let's
Start over.
restate the
Okay.
motion. Yeah, there.
A second, so
Mhm.
it's.
Yeah, okay, so it expired. That motion was defeated by expiration.
It got old.
It died of boredom. Okay. Okay, so let's make a motion to make amendments to the resolution in front of us, which will appear in Exhibit B, Conditions of Approval. Paragraph 6, which addresses amplified music. We're adding, okay, that paragraph's fine, right? Except that we're adding the monitoring of the decibel levels at the property lines. And then the language that we went through previously that
Yeah.
Dina already noted.
Yeah.
We already know what the changes are to paragraph 6. We're leaving alone paragraph 18, just as a note. The hours of operation, we'll discuss that later if it needs to be discussed. We're adding paragraph 19 for hours of amplified music.
No.
Wait,
For
no.
when
for
guests need
just
to leave.
Well, it's more than amplified music. For hours, for event scheduling, paragraph 19 will say that the music has to stop, the amplified music has to stop at 8:30
No,
PM.
we had actually factored that into paragraph 6.
That goes in
Yeah,
paragraph
because-
6?
So paragraph 6 had everything related to amplified music.
Well, then they
Paragraph-
are all amplified music.
Paragraph
All the
19
hours
is,
are amplified.
paragraph 19,
Vendors,
guests
the
need
vendors.
to leave
Only
by,
apply to
guests
amplified
need
music.
to leave by 9, vendors by 10.
Correct.
Those
Paragraph
don't apply
20
to events that don't have amplified music, is what we're saying. They only apply to
That, yeah,
events
that
that
just
have
applies. That's just
Okay.
a condition,
So-
that's just a thing.
Let me back up. What I just was talking about for paragraph 19 actually goes into paragraph 6, where we're adding the conditions that the not TPC, sorry, it's getting late, that the Landmark Society has already been operating under, that the music will end, the amplified music will end at 8:30. The guests will leave by 9 and the vendors are out by 10.
No,
Correct.
that's not 6 though. 6 is everything that we
Right.
had,
Oh.
that Dina has written down. She
I
wrote
just
it
said
down.
paragraph 6.
Yeah, but so the new provision 19 speaks to when guests need to leave.
Yeah.
And when vendors need to leave. It's independent of amplified of the, our
So
provisions
only
around
the
amplified
music part goes under paragraph 6, but the other two
Yeah, we
terms go under a new
decided to, we
paragraph.
decided to
Okay.
cluster all of that into 6.
Okay,
So
all right,
6 is-
noted.
It might not be the best way to do it, but that's, and then 19 is the guests leave by 9, vendors by 10, and then 20 was pickups and deliveries are Fridays and Mondays only.
Okay, so the 8:30 ending of music goes in paragraph 6, the guests leaving at 9 and the vendors at 10 goes into paragraph 19. Paragraph 20 is the deliveries only being allowed on Friday and Monday. And then we need to add whatever paragraph number you like, that we are going to hold an interim review for an update
yeah.
on the current operations in 3 months. And then we're going to hold a meeting in which we are considering revisions to the CUP in 9 months.
Okay.
Is that it?
Okay.
All right, that's the
Yep.
motion on the table.
I second the motion.
Woo! All right, we have a second. Can we take the roll call vote, Chris?
Commissioner Woodward,
Aye.
Commissioner Sai, Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Chair DeFever.
Aye. All right, thank you very much. That concludes our meeting for tonight. Thanks to the people who sat
Yeah,
through
that's
the
right.
governmental process with us. And I call the meeting adjourned.
Dedication.
We appreciate you much more now.